the mental transmitter of Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276 Earth, I'm back. Hearing Adam's words, Alex breathed a sigh of relief, then quickly put his thoughts aside and began to ask about his own affairs. It's done. Can you send me back? The thought of returning to Earth made Alex tremble with excitement. Even his breath was unsteady and intermittent. Adam carefully put away the soul stone, which had suddenly dimmed. He turned to Alex, a strange smile on his calm face. He said slowly, I'm curious. Why do you insist on returning to Earth? Adam paused, pointed to the starry sky around him, and said meaningfully, compared to the vast universe, Earth is just a grain of sand. There's no room for a hero like you. I have my own pursuits. Being a hero has never been my goal. Alex was stunned by this and paused for a moment before answering. Adam grinned slightly, but remained non-committal. Seeing Adam's expression, Alex felt a little annoyed, and his tone rose. What? Are you thinking of going back on your word? With your own power, you can easily return on your own. Adam's expression remained unchanged, his tone as calm and unmoved as ever. Alex shrugged and shook his head. Most of this power I have isn't my own. I'll have to give it back before I leave. Give it back? Adam looked at Alex in astonishment, as if he couldn't believe his ears. There were countless people in this world who would sacrifice everything to gain power, but giving back the power they had taken was unheard of. Alex nodded impatiently, his tone growing increasingly hostile. Do you want to send me back to Earth or not? Just one word. Adam chuckled at Alex's words and nodded. Sending you back is fine, but I need to take something from you. What is it? Alex glanced at Adam warily, then glanced down at himself, his face filled with confusion. He was alone, wandering the universe, and he didn't have anything precious worth Adam mentioning. Your memories? What do you mean? Hearing Adam's answer, Alex felt an inexplicable surge of nervousness, his voice becoming a little stiff. Earth's civilization is still very primitive. Now is not the time to engage with the advanced civilizations of the universe. Adam's expression grew serious as he spoke. Asymmetric technology and information will not lead to Earth's progress. Instead, it will plunge it into chaos and, ultimately, even annihilation. Noticing Alex's somewhat casual demeanor, Adam's face darkened. He shouted, Don't think I'm joking. Earth's secrets are beyond your imagination. His voice suddenly rose to a higher pitch, like a lion's roar. Earth, let it develop slowly. Hearing Adam's repeated warnings, Alex's heart sank. He wanted to ask, but seeing Adam's expression, it was clear he wasn't prepared to speak further. Despite his internal anger, Alex couldn't help but grow serious. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded and agreed. Okay, but are you sure you can do it? Alex was a master of the mind, but Adam was not. Whether Adam could erase Alex's memory was uncertain. It's possible to place a seal, Adam said, blushing slightly, a touch embarrassed. Of course, don't deliberately trigger it. When the time is right, the seal will automatically release. Alex rolled his eyes, his legs together, pretending to let him do as he pleased. Adam chuckled dryly, his expression suddenly stern. He raised his hand and placed it against Alex's forehead. The soul stone in his palm shimmered with a faint glow. Given Adam's spiritual mastery, sealing Alex's memories proved difficult, so he had to rely on the soul stone's power. While the soul stone wasn't a gem dedicated to the mind, it was at least partly of the same origin as the mind stone, making it somewhat useful. The moment Adam's hand touched Alex's forehead, Alex instinctively tried to strike back, but luckily he caught himself in time and managed to restrain himself. However, his mind was faster than his body's, and he collided with the soul stone immediately. The soul stone, its power greatly reduced, lost its former edge and seemed to retreat under Alex's mental assault. However, Adam arrived and repressed Alex. Alex, realizing his recklessness, immediately suppressed his mental power. Under the combined power of Adam and the soul stone, Alex quickly lost consciousness. As Alex's consciousness faded completely, Adam's voice faintly echoed in his ears. All right, I'll take you back now. When Alex awoke from the darkness, he found himself no longer surrounded by the vast starry sky or the majestic Xander planet, but rather a deep, dark alley filled with a stench of decay from a stinking sewer. What is this place? Alex rubbed his forehead and stood up, surveying his surroundings as he racked his brains for memory. Contrary to Alex's expectations, his memories seemed not to have been sealed, but rather blurred, then covered in a sheath. Alex's experiences wandering the universe were all there. The Sheer Empire and the Nova Empire were all in his mind, and Lilandra and Princess Shava were also deep in his memories. But the advanced technologies Alex had once so carefully memorized had been blurred, leaving only vague remnants. Furthermore, Thanos seemed to have become a taboo. Alex knew everything about his relationship with Thanos, but only knew it. Like artifacts in a museum, they could only be admired from a distance, never touched up close. Whenever Alex had any other thoughts, a stabbing pain immediately struck his brain. Forget it, never mind. After several painful nerve tingles, Alex gave up on further exploration and instead surveyed his surroundings, muttering uncertainly, "Am I back to Earth now?" Suddenly, Alex froze. Because of the dim light, Alex's mind had been preoccupied with his memories, and he hadn't carefully examined his surroundings. Now that his mind turned, he immediately realized that the surrounding environment was somewhat familiar. It was the place he saw when he first woke up in this world. What a fate, Alex sighed. A wry smile appeared on his face, shook his head, and walked out of the alley step by step. The alley was not deep, only a dozen meters, and it took Alex more than a minute to reach the intersection. On the side of the street lights illuminated the wide asphalt road. Several cars whizzed past, leaving behind a few ethereal tones, some of which were distant and some of which were familiar. Taking a long breath, Alex looked up to the sky and shouted, "Earth, I'm back, a new week has begun. Work hard." Chapter 277 Things Have Changed. Alex's cry caught the attention of many, but when they turned to look, no one was in sight. "Where is this place?" Alex, surprised by the unfamiliar surroundings, paled slightly. Alex activated teleportation, but instead of the bustling floating island he'd imagined, he found a vast expanse of ruined buildings, overgrown with weeds as tall as a foot. With a hint of panic, Alex summoned his mind, and his immense telekinetic power instantly enveloped the entire island. Compared to the floating island he remembered, the one he saw was significantly larger. Alex was surprised to find no one, not even a single living thing, on such a vast island, save for the overgrown weeds. What the hell is going on? Alex's telepathic vision grew increasingly tense, and he expanded his telekinetic power once again, scanning the entire Earth. Just then, a figure appeared out of nowhere, its shiny bald head conspicuous. Otto. Alex's face flushed crimson at the sight of the newcomer, his eyes blazing with fury. It was none other than Otto, the observer who had once attempted to imprison Alex. Looking at Alex, whom he hadn't seen in 30 years, Otto's expression was complex. Instead of the disgust and resentment he had once possessed, Otto felt a touch of emotion, a touch of nostalgia. When Alex disappeared, Otto had watched from the sidelines, offering no assistance. In Otto's view, Alex was a cancer on Earth, and it was best for him to leave. But everything that had happened over the past 30 years had made Otto doubt himself. Perhaps what Alex had said was true, the universe is chaotic, and I am chaotic too, but I am conscious. I can't change the universe's chaotic state, but I can guide it in a positive direction. Thinking of this, Otto coughed lightly and took the initiative to greet him. "Welcome back, Alex." Alex had already made a move on Otto when he suddenly heard Otto's words. He froze in his tracks, staring blankly at Otto, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "We've got plenty of time. Why don't we find a place to talk?" Seeing Alex's stunned expression, Otto blushed slightly, folding his hands into his wide sleeves and speaking slowly. Alex felt increasingly strange. He looked Otto up and down for a long moment before demanding, threateningly, "What on earth do you want, Otto?" Alex had never had a good impression of Otto. To Alex, Otto's actions were like a weasel offering New Year's greetings to a chicken. "I mean no harm." Otto shook his head, sighed softly, and continued, "A lot has happened in the past 30 years, tell me, what exactly happened?" Alex interrupted him before he could finish, pointing around and demanding with a fierce look on his face. "What's going on here? How did it become like this?" Otto was silent for a long time, then sighed and said slowly, "It's a long story. Follow me, and I'll tell you everything." Without waiting for Alex's nod, Otto took off and disappeared into the sky in an instant. Alex tried to ignore Otto. After all, with his telepathy, he knew everything even without Otto's input. But just as Alex was about to act, Otto's voice came back, a single word. "Some things are better for me to tell. After all, I'm the observer." "Fuck, With a muttered curse, Alex quickly disappeared into the sky, chasing Otto. In a moment, Alex, following Otto, left Earth and landed directly on the far side of the moon. To Alex's surprise, a vast and luxurious palace lay on the far side of the moon. Judging by Otto's imposing appearance, this must be where he lived. "You really know how to enjoy yourself," Alex teased, his eyes darting around, a look of mild surprise on his face. The palace was incredibly luxurious and, beyond imagination, brimming with advanced technology, far surpassing even Earth's space technology. "This was built by the Kree, but it fell into disrepair over time," Otto said, looking at Alex. "I had nowhere to stay on Earth, so I found this place to rest." Alex was astonished. He had never imagined the Kree had arrived so early on Earth, and even built such a magnificent palace on the moon. Otto had turned away, oblivious to Alex's expression, and continued to lead Alex towards the palace. Alex quickly gathered his composure and caught up with Otto, eagerly asking, "Now, are you ready to tell me? I have quite a bit of information here. You should take a look first." Otto calmly led Alex into a large, enclosed hall. The vast palace was filled with countless holographic screens, each recording a variety of people and events. Alex was dazzled by the holograms, and it took him a moment to make them out. He turned to Otto, his eyes filled with surprise. "Did you record all this?" Otto nodded, rummaged through the tangled mess, and personally brought dozens of holograms to Alex. "Take a look at these, you'll know everything." He paused, then added, "Ask me if you have anything else." Alex's excitement was already faltering, and as soon as Otto finished speaking, he immediately clicked on a hologram and began to examine it carefully. Otto's record was very brief, and the videos on the holographic screens were clearly edited, piecing together numerous small incidents, with the characters and times appearing in varying detail. However, despite its brevity, the records hit the essential points precisely, with each holographic screen capturing an extraordinary event. From beginning to end, there was no missing a single detail. There were dozens of holographic screens, each at least 3 hours long, and it was impossible to imagine how long it would take to review them all. Alex didn't watch them frame by frame, but simply fast-forwarded to get a general idea of what happened. Even so, it took Alex almost a day to finish. When the last holographic screen went dark, Alex's face turned ashen. He wanted to explode with rage, but he had nowhere to vent it. He could only suppress it, roaring in frustration. How could it have come to this? His voice was filled with disbelief, unspeakable disappointment, and pain. Hearing Alex's words, Otto opened his mouth to try and explain, but after a long pause, he could only sigh. "I don't know either. You'll always be a coward." Alex glared at Otto fiercely, then turned on activated teleportation, vanishing from the moon. When he reappeared, Alex had returned to Earth. "I watched the new Fantastic Four today, and it only had one sentence, nothing I could make sense of." Chapter 278 Tony Stark. Returning to New York, Alex's mood was completely different. Thinking of the mutants' current plight, the excitement of returning to Earth had vanished, leaving only deep worry and endless guilt. 30 years had passed, and so much had changed. The floating island, once a hideout for mutants, had attracted countless attention, both mutants and humans, since Alex had brought it out of the wilderness. As more and more mutants joined, the power of the floating island, the home of mutants, grew, eventually becoming a thorn in the side of many nations on Earth. 20 years ago, led by the United States and the Soviet Union, nearly 40 countries around the world launched a joint military assault on the floating island, the home of mutants. Unsurprisingly, the floating island was destroyed, and nearly 80% of the mutants on it were massacred. Few mutants were truly skilled in combat, and few could survive the human assault. This catastrophe ignited the seeds of hatred between mutants and humans. Magneto, formerly known as Eric, seized the opportunity to recruit mutants harboring resentment towards humanity, leading to a surge in the power of the Brotherhood of Mutants. Furthermore, Magneto launched numerous wars against humanity. While these wars ultimately failed, they also successfully exacerbated the hatred between humans and mutants. Besides Magneto and Eric, the Hellfire Club also played a significant role. "I should have killed Sebastian Shaw." Alex felt deeply depressed as he recalled the images he had just seen from Otto's place, where Sebastian Shaw had repeatedly flashed. Alex thought as he walked aimlessly. When he came to his senses, he found himself in Manhattan, a magnificent skyscraper before him. In 1994, The Americans already had skyscrapers. Alex was exclaiming in admiration when he suddenly noticed a sign hanging atop the building. He was startled. Stark Industries? Howard Stark. After a moment's pause, Alex chuckled and shrugged, then stepped into the building. Let's go see Howard and ask about Emma and the others. Otto's records were of major events on Earth. While they primarily focused on mutants, they were more focused on the mutant community as a whole. Alex still had no idea where Emma and the others were now. Alex walked into the lobby and instantly released his telekinesis. But to Alex's disappointment, there seemed to be no sign of Howard in the building. He must have gone into that secret lab again, he muttered. Alex hurried to the front desk, ready to leave a message to let Howard know he was back. Before Alex could even reach the front desk, a sudden commotion erupted behind him, accompanied by flashing cameras. Mr. Stark, rumors say you had dinner with a Hollywood actress last night. This was the gossip reporter. Mr. Stark, what are your thoughts on the Gulf War veterans' appeal? This was the current affairs reporter. Alex heard the repeated calls of Mr. Stark, and a smile crossed his face. He quickly turned, about to greet the person in the center of the crowd, only to discover that this Stark was not the same Stark. This Mr. Stark before him vaguely resembled Howard, but younger, more unrestrained and uninhibited. He glanced past the next series of questions and turned to look at the first questioner, a voluptuous female reporter with bright red hair that tossed seductively. I love your question, Mr. Stark smiled frivolously, pointing at the female reporter and answering with an intoxicated look. In fact, we not only had dinner together, but also spent a wonderful evening together. Oh, it was an unforgettable evening. Seeing Stark's response, the reporters, eager to see him, were stunned. They watched as Stark pushed through the crowd and left with a dignified manner. It really is like that. Alex stood at a distance, watching the young Stark disappear into an elevator, his smile growing even wider. Well, it's nice to go see my nephew. As he spoke, Alex had disappeared from the spot. Elsewhere, in the elevator, young Mr. Stark leaned against the wall, turned his head to look at the portly man behind him, and asked idly, Happy, what's up today, Mr. Obadiah Stan wants to discuss something with you. It's about the future development of the company. The portly man behind Stark hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a pink notebook, flipped through a few pages, and finally spoke seriously. Young Stark interrupted Happy impatiently, grumbling, Oh, I'm not the one for this, Mr. Stark, this is your company. A flicker of embarrassment crossed Happy's chubby face, then gave way to seriousness, a solemn expression, as if he were attending a funeral. Stark rolled his eyes speechlessly, ignoring Happy and walking straight out of the elevator. After taking a few steps, Stark suddenly stopped, looking warily at the young man who had inexplicably appeared before him. Who are you? Why are you here? This floor belonged to him, Stark alone. No one could be here without his permission, and the person before him was clearly not someone he knew. As Stark finished his words, another figure emerged from behind him. It was Happy. The portly Happy spread his hands, shielding Stark behind him like a hen protecting her chicks. He turned to glare at the man before him, his face straining to appear fierce. Tell me, who are you? Why are you here? The person who arrived was none other than Alex, who had come in pursuit. Alex ignored Happy, who was blocking the way in front of him, and his gaze fell directly on Stark behind him. A hint of gentleness flashed in his eyes, and he chuckled and asked, What's your name? Alex asked naturally, like an elder questioning a younger one. Stark and Happy were both startled, a strange look crossing their faces. Alex realized his mistake the moment he said it, and his face flushed slightly. He took a deep breath and asked again, By the way, where's your father? Why can't I see him? As he spoke, Alex subconsciously pretended to look around. Call the police, Happy. Stark's face immediately changed, and he shouted. Before Happy could make a move, Alex took action. While controlling Happy's body, he began to explain, I'm your father, a friend of Howard Stark. Are you a mutant? Happy's abnormality did not scare Stark, but instead aroused his curiosity. He looked Alex up and down for a long while, and suddenly his eyes lit up. He asked hesitantly, Are you Alex? Alex, uncle. Alex was immediately embarrassed when he heard that. In his past and present lives, he had only called others that, and no one had ever called him that. It just seemed like his generation was rising. But after thinking about it, Alex still felt a little uncomfortable. His face was a little embarrassed, but he nodded and said, Yes, I'm Alex. Up, your uncle, Alex, Uncle. Stark obviously noticed something was wrong. Alex in front of him was about the same age as him, and it was really awkward to call him uncle. I'm Tony Stark, officially entering a new era. The era of heroes begins with Tony Stark. Chapter 279. Goodbye, Nick. Hello, Tony, Alex said dryly, then immediately changed the subject, asking, Tony, where's your father? He's not hiding out in some lab doing secret research again, is he? A faint smile crossed Alex's face as he spoke. But then, his expression froze, as he noticed something was amiss with Tony. What happened? Alex's brow furrowed, his watery eyes flashing with a frightening glint. The power Alex radiated was too much for Tony to withstand. Within a breath, Tony was on the verge of collapsing to the ground, his face pale and sweat dripping down like raindrops. Stop, Happy, beside Tony, was also a little embarrassed. As if eager to protect his master, Happy suddenly moved, slamming into Alex like a speeding truck. For a moment, Alex didn't even react. Happy's knock sent him stumbling back a few steps, his awe-inspiring aura instantly vanishing. Alex froze for a moment, then noticed something strange about Tony and Happy. A little embarrassed, he said, I'm sorry, he's dead. Tony, having recovered somewhat, interrupted before Alex could finish. Dead? Alex's body trembled, and it dawned on him that 30 years had passed. 30 years, a long time, long enough for the world's greatest assassin to unknowingly erase a trace of someone. Muttering to himself, Alex's mind reeled in memories of Howard. It suddenly dawned on Alex that his memories of Howard were mostly stuck in World War II, when Howard Stark was a dashing, romantic figure. Yes, dead. Just as Alex was lost in his memories, Tony's voice rang out again, his tone suddenly calm, tinged with pain and sorrow. Car accident, car accident. Alex's face was filled with disbelief. Tony nodded, a look of bitterness on his face. It was truly speechless that a great engineer could ultimately lose his life because of his car's faulty brake system. Alex lowered his head slightly, sadness evident in his dark eyes. The atmosphere suddenly froze as Tony and Alex fell silent, which in turn made Happy, standing beside him, anxious. She was scratching her head and could hardly stand. What's wrong, Happy? Tony finally noticed Happy and asked, a puzzled look on his face. Happy glanced at Alex, raised his hand and tapped his wrist, then explained, it's almost time, and Mr. Obadiah Stane is still waiting for us. That's right, you go ahead. Alex, regaining his composure, offered, I'll see you when I'm free. Without waiting for Tony to speak, Alex teleported away. Leaving Stark Industries, Alex wandered the streets of Manhattan alone. Alex learned more and more details from Tony's memories, but this also made him feel even more depressed. As they walked, the sky gradually darkened, and the street lights along the road began to light up one by one. Alex slowly raised his head, sighed, and was about to leave when a familiar voice rang out. Why didn't you come to me? The powerful voice was accusing, almost annoyed. Alex paused and turned to look at the source of the voice. An awkward smile crossed his vacant face. After a long pause, he greeted, long time no see, Nick. The visitor was none other than Nick Fury, a member of the Howlings during World War II, current director of SHIELD, and Alex's brother. Nick Fury, dressed in a black leather trench coat, stood in the dark corner, appearing even more inconspicuous, his single eye gleaming brightly. Upon hearing Alex's response, a flicker of reminiscence crossed his dark face, and he chuckled softly as he replied. Yeah, 30 years, he paused, followed by another long sigh. 30 years, and you finally showed up. I'm sorry. Alex didn't know what else to say, so he could only say I'm sorry to express his guilt. Nick Fury strode out of the darkness with a swift stride. Before Alex could react, he hugged him tightly, his face filled with excitement. Don't say sorry, I'm glad you're back. Alex paused for a moment, his stiff hands gradually relaxing. A few minutes later, in a bar, Alex and Nick Fury sat next to each other, pouring several bottles of wine in front of them. So many years have passed, yet the war seems like it was just yesterday. Nick Fury tossed back his head, finishing his glass of brandy. He turned to look at the silent Alex, a deep sadness in his single eye. There's been no news of Steve, but Bucky has popped up a few times now and then. Logan has truly become Wolverine, but he's forgotten everything before. Where's Natasha? Alex had gathered some of this from Tony's memories. He wasn't surprised by Nick Fury's words, but rather felt a slight sense of loss. The Howling Commandos back then, some dead, some missing, were truly heartbreaking. Nick Fury finished another glass of brandy, then refilled Alex's half-empty glass. Then he explained, "There's a problem in the Soviet Union, and Natasha went there to investigate." Alex nodded, took a sip of his drink, and after a moment's silence, he asked, "Any news about them?" They were undoubtedly Emma and the other girls. Alex hadn't discovered their current hiding place, either in Otto's records or Tony's memories. In fact, ever since the several clashes, Emma and the mutant family had completely hidden themselves away, with no news leaking out at all. This was the reason Alex hadn't looked for them. "I don't know," Nick Fury explained without hesitation, shaking his head. "Ever since that raid, they've been much more cautious. They wouldn't easily reveal their hiding place, not even to me." Alex seemed prepared for this and didn't seem too disappointed. He sighed with a wry smile, his heart growing heavier. "But don't worry," Nick Fury looked at Alex and whispered soothingly. "I'll get your message out as soon as possible. I'm sure they'll get it soon. They'll be overjoyed." Alex's lips curved into a smile, and he took a deep breath before saying, "I hope so. By the way, I haven't asked yet. What's been going on all these years?" Nick Fury, half drunk, finally asked. Alex's face became increasingly bitter. He pondered for a long moment before explaining, "When the savage land was about to be destroyed, I borrowed the power of the cosmic cube and wanted to." Chapter 280. The Beauty is Haggard. Alex recounted everything he could and needed to say, finally concluding as daylight approached. After hearing Alex's words, Nick paused, his dark face heavy with worry. "They're not going to invade our Earth, are they?" S.H.I.E.L.D. has always been committed to protecting Earth, and upon hearing of the sudden existence of a powerful alien civilization, Nick's immediate concern was Earth's safety. Alex paused, wanting to shake his head in denial, but a sudden flash of a movie scene stopped him. After a moment's deliberation, he spoke, "There are some things I can't elaborate on. An invasion is definitely coming, but it's unlikely to happen anytime soon." "Shortly," Nick repeated, then shook his head again, his expression serious. "No matter what, we still have to react quickly, otherwise." Nick didn't finish the rest of the sentence, but the consequences were predictable. "In 20 years, nothing will happen," Alex thought for a moment, then reiterated, suggesting, "With Earth's current technology, catching up with alien civilizations is impossible. The only way is to rely on superpowers and form a team of superpowered individuals." Nick frowned and said hesitantly, "Are you talking about mutants?" Alex was startled. He'd actually been referring to the Avengers, but he hadn't expected Nick to mistake him for mutants. But then again, with Iron Man and other superheroes nowhere to be found on Earth right now, mutants were the only possible way to form a team of superpowered individuals. With this in mind, Alex shook his head and said, "Given the mutants' current situation, it's not suitable." After saying this, Alex paused, then added, "At least not in the open, but covertly." Nick nodded, sighed softly, and whispered, "I'll make some preparations." Before he could finish, Nick suddenly shuddered, turned to look at Alex, and shouted with surprise, "News!" Alex was stunned at first, but then he immediately realized what was happening and stood up with a look of excitement on his face. Nick said this and immediately pulled out something that looked like a pager from his pocket. He flipped through it a few times before looking up at Alex. "Headquarters has word. They've learned you're back and are on their way to New York." Hearing they were on their way, Alex was excited, but also a little timid. He even wanted to run away, not daring to face them. "Alex, they've been waiting for you for so many years." Nick, seeing Alex's expression, immediately guessed what he was thinking and warned him, "If you disappear again, they'll destroy all of New York." Nick couldn't imagine the madness Emma and the others would feel when they learned Alex had vanished again. Alex gathered himself, took a deep breath, and his expression gradually became firm. "Don't worry, I won't leave again." As soon as he finished speaking, Alex suddenly froze, his mind inexplicably recalling the last time he had said that, after a 10-year sleep. Sadly, he had broken his promise, and he had been missing for 30 years. Watching Alex fall silent again, Nick paused for a moment, and was about to offer a word of comfort when he saw Alex, who had just sat down, suddenly stand up, his face tense. "They're here." "They were here? They're really anxious," Nick muttered, tactfully standing up and heading outside. "I'm going home too, you guys take your time chatting." Watching Nick's retreating figure, Alex suddenly tensed up again. He clasped his hands awkwardly behind his back. Occasionally glancing at the door, his face agitated and a touch panicked. Just as Alex felt his heart burst, a figure swiftly rushed in, her flowing blonde hair gleaming brightly. It was none other than Emma. Following Emma, 3 more people excitedly ran in, Vivian Leigh, Audrey, and Monroe. After the 3 women, another person hurried in. It was Crystal, the Inhuman. Although somewhat puzzled by Crystal's presence, Alex's attention immediately focused on Emma and the other 4 women. Compared to them 30 years ago, Emma didn't seem any older, but her spirit was much more haggard. Vivian Leigh and the other 2 women were just ordinary people. Although they looked well-maintained, the wrinkles around their brows and eyes were very noticeable. But what captivated Alex most were the women's eyes. Their brightness faded, their hazy eyes now filled with endless sorrow and grief. At that moment, Alex's tense heartstrings snapped, his eyes wide with tears. His mouth parted slightly, and he uttered a few trembling words. "I'm back." Emma and the other women paused 3 steps from Alex. The dim bar and the blaring music seemed to vanish. The world was left with only themselves and Alex, standing across from them. Tears streaked across their faces, but they ignored them, staring blankly at Alex for a long moment. Finally, at Alex's words, they collapsed, each throwing themselves into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably, muttering, "I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back." Alex stretched his chest and arms, enveloping the 4 women in his embrace, his apologies repeated. "This isn't the place to talk," Crystal said, standing behind the huddled group. A flicker of envy flashed in her eyes. She turned to look at the gazes around her, coughed lightly, and warned, "If you have anything to say, let's talk at home." Crystal's reminder brought Emma back to her senses. She poked her head out of Alex's arms, glanced around, and frowned slightly. "Let's go home." As she spoke, Emma telepathically revealed the mutant family's current hiding place to Alex. Alex glanced at Emma in surprise, then turned back to Crystal with gratitude. "Thank you." It turned out that after the destruction of the floating island, the mutant family, with the help of Crystal and the Inhumans, had migrated to Mount Everest. With support from Atlan, they had established a mutant city called Alex City, which bore the exact same name as Alex. Crystal snorted softly and turned her head away proudly, as if she didn't want to talk to Alex at all. Alex was a little amused and helpless as he watched Crystal turn and walk out of the bar. He looked down at Emma and the other girls and asked, "What's wrong with her?" Emma and the other girls exchanged a glance and chuckled, but no one offered an explanation. "Come on, let's go home first." Emma raised her eyebrows and patted Alex's chest coquettishly, saying with a smile, "You'll understand everything slowly when we get back." With Emma's mental guidance, Alex enveloped the girls and Crystal, who had unknowingly walked out of the bar, with his telekinesis, instantly bringing them to Alex City, the new home of mutants. Chapter 281, Confessions. Alex City, built atop Mount Everest, utilizes the same technology as Atlan, effectively shielding it from prying eyes, both human and otherwise. Compared to Atlan's grandeur, Alex City is much simpler, lacking in ornamentation, like mass-produced low-rent housing, plain yet practical. When Alex, Emma, and the others appeared on the streets of Alex City, they immediately attracted countless glances, with Alex commanding over 90% of the attention. Due to their physical mutations, most mutants live longer than humans. 30 years later, many of those who were mutants back then are still young and strong. They recognized Alex immediately, though uncertainly. "Alex, hello." Alex glanced around the room, nodded excitedly, and shouted, "I'm back." His voice was soft, but it echoed throughout the city. Everyone, no matter where they were, heard his words and knew that the former mutant hero, Alex, had returned. Almost every mutant was overcome with emotion, tears welling in their eyes. Which mutant in Mutant City didn't remember Alex's kindness and long for his swift return? Leaving behind him a single word and a fleeting moment, Alex vanished again with Emma and the other girls. For years, Mutant City had been utterly mistreated by humans, the Hellfire Club, and the Brotherhood of Mutants. The X-Men suffered heavy casualties in the initial war with humans, and even now, they could only maintain the safety of Alex City. Any resistance was impossible. Consequently, many mutants harbored a deep anger, unable to vent it. This anger grew, and the entire city seemed shrouded in a sense of malevolence. Over time, this affected the character of many, especially the younger mutants. Alex had observed this upon his return to Alex City, and so had made a special appearance. Besides announcing his return to Mutant City, Alex also hoped to restore its faith. So far, it seems the effect is quite good. Emma had always been aware of the hidden dangers in the city, but she hadn't known how to alleviate them. Now, with just a few words, Alex had dissipated much of the violence in the mutants' hearts. Emma was surprised and moved. "Alex, it's so great that you're back. You've suffered so much over the years." Alex opened his arms again, hugged the women tightly, and secretly began to draw on his energy to repair their bodies. In just a few moments, the women were like being reborn, instantly looking a dozen years younger. Their faces were flushed and their spirits were bright, and Crystal, who was standing nearby, was envious. "Alex, please, don't leave us again, okay?" Feeling the changes in her body, Audrey didn't look happy at all. She looked up at Alex and said with tears in her eyes, "We don't ask for immortality, we just hope to grow old with you." Alex was shocked all over. He looked down at Audrey's delicate face that was rejuvenated. He was stunned for a while, nodded heavily and said, "I swear, not even God can let me leave you again. No matter where you go, you must take us with you, even if you die." After years of precipitation, Vivian Lee's temperament has become more mature, and her calm eyes flashed with an irresistible look. Alex's gaze shifted from Audrey to Vivian's. They held each other for a moment, then he nodded gently, his face thick with guilt. "Wherever you are, I'll be there." He paused, then lowered his head to gently kiss Vivian's eyes, adding slowly, "Even if I die, I won't let you face any danger. I swear, Alex." Monroe shouted without a word, then thrust herself forward and fiercely bit Alex's mouth, refusing to separate for a long time, melting all her longing and resentment into the kiss. Feeling the fiery heat between his lips and teeth, Alex felt no more lustful thoughts, only deep guilt and boundless love. His hands unconsciously exerted a little more strength, as if trying to rub the woman into him. Emma and the other women, as if sensing Alex's affection, did not struggle, their faces filled with enjoyment and relish. Just as the atmosphere intensified, an unexpected sound echoed, a heavy footstep that seemed to flaunt his weight. "Alex! Alex!" The repeated shouts destroyed the atmosphere between Alex and Emma and the other girls. Alex was full of complaints in his heart, secretly annoyed that this person came at the wrong time. But as he listened, Alex was suddenly stunned, because the voice was too familiar. "Logan!" Alex turned his head to look outside the door, with an expression of disbelief on his face. As soon as Alex finished speaking, a majestic figure strode in, with an unconcealable joy and excitement on his rough face. It was Logan, who had not been seen for a long time. "Logan, is it really you?" Alex remembered that Nick had talked about Logan a few hours ago, and that he had lost his memory and forgot the past. But now it seems that Logan did not seem to have lost his memory. Logan hugged Alex tightly without hesitation, letting go for a long moment. He stroked his temple and casually said, "Did you see Nick?" Without waiting for Alex to nod, Logan explained, "I've forgotten a lot, but of course, you, Alex, I will never forget." Alex noticed the sadness in Logan's eyes and gently hugged him, saying soothingly, "Just slowly find your memory. One day, you'll remember it." Logan's physique was unique, his memories hadn't actually disappeared, they had simply been deliberately sealed away. Logan smiled faintly and stepped aside to make way for the young man following behind him, his face brimming with pride. "Is this little Luo?" In fact, Alex had noticed the young man who looked so much like Logan when Logan barged in, and the image of that child immediately popped into his mind. Hearing his nickname, the young man curled his lips into satisfaction and explained loudly, "Please, I have a name, Dakin. This is my name, okay, Dakin." Alex looked Dakin up and down for a long time, and said somewhat listlessly, "Little Luo has grown up, and even Howard's son has grown up. I have missed so much." This sentence made everyone silent. They didn't know what Alex had experienced in the past 30 years, but it was conceivable that while they missed Alex, Alex would miss them too. "There's still a lot of time, we can get it back slowly." Emma reached out and grabbed Alex's hand, whispering to comfort, "The days that belong to us are still very long, very long." "Yes, the days that belong to us are still very long." Alex sighed, and his mood couldn't help but cheer up. To updates that haven't been seen for a long time, it's worth encouraging. Chapter 282 News from Hydra. Half a year had passed unnoticed. Alex hadn't traveled anywhere. He stayed in Alex City all day, concentrating on being with Emma and the other three girls. Sometimes he'd help Emma with some matters, and sometimes he'd chat with Audrey and the others. His days were quite leisurely. "Alex, you don't have to be with us all the time." Seeing Alex accompanying her once again, Emma knew that Alex had been feeling guilty and wanted to make amends. While she was happy, she didn't want Alex to stay like this, humbled as if he had lost himself. This was not the Alex Emma wanted to see. Hearing Emma's words, Alex was stunned at first, then he chuckled and said self-deprecatingly, "Why, it's only been a short time and you're tired of me, Alex, we all know your heart." Emma ignored Alex's teasing, reached out and gently stroked Alex's slightly wrinkled brow, with a hint of pity, and said gently, "You can do whatever you like or want to do. You really don't have to be with us all the time." Alex looked at Emma's serious face for a moment, then a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. When he was about to speak, Emma's index finger had already stretched out, blocking the words that Alex was about to say in his mouth. "Of course. Whatever you do, don't forget us." Emma pressed her index finger against Alex's lips, her eyes narrowed slightly, and she spoke fiercely, feigning a threat. "Otherwise, don't blame us sisters for being rude." Alex wrapped her arms around Emma and embraced her, calling out affectionately, "Emma." After a moment of tenderness, Emma dismissed Alex and returned to her own affairs. After leaving Emma, Alex thought better of it and decided not to seek out Audrey and the other girls. Instead, he returned to New York. 30 years had passed, and New York had become even more prosperous. Standing on the busy streets, Alex hesitated for a moment before heading towards Stark Industries. Alex still harbored guilt over Howard's death. If he had been on Earth, Howard might not have died. Alex could no longer do anything for Howard, but for Howard's son, Alex felt he could still do something. He remembered that back when he was still on Earth, Alex had considered becoming Howard's son's teacher. Alex had been here once before, teleporting directly into Stark Tower, right in Tony's office. To Alex's surprise, there was no sign of Tony in the office. Instead, a slightly plump, middle-aged man sat behind his desk, his expression somewhat serious. The man was so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't notice Alex's presence. Alex waited for a long time, then reluctantly spoke up, "Excuse me, who are you?" Alex's sudden voice seemed to startle the middle-aged man, who suddenly jumped up from his chair, his eyes a little panicked. Upon spotting Alex, a flicker of confusion crossed his face, but his tone became stern. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Alex's appearance infuriated Abate. He had already issued orders that no one else be allowed in the area. Alex paid no attention to the middle-aged man's expression, assuming he was genuinely frightened. He smiled faintly and said, "Hello, I'm Tony's friend." Alex paused briefly before adding, "I'm here to see Tony. I have something to tell you." "I wonder where he is right now." "You're Tony's friend." Obadiah looked him over for a moment, then asked suspiciously, "Why haven't I seen you before?" Because searching someone's memory with telepathy was somewhat unethical. Alex rarely used this ability unless absolutely necessary. Glancing at the middle-aged man, Alex showed no interest in staying any longer. He shrugged and turned toward the door. If he hadn't worried about Tony getting in trouble for his sudden disappearance, Alex would have teleported away long ago. Seeing Alex walk out without a word, Obadiah was stunned. After a moment's pause, he immediately chased after him, but there was no sign of Alex. Having lost track of Alex, Obadiah seemed a little impatient. He tugged at his tie, muttered a few curses, and disappeared into the hallway. Alex teleported out of the office. Not finding Tony, Alex decided to talk to Nick and get some information on the Hellfire Club, the Brotherhood of Mutants, and Hydra. He'd been back for so long, so he had to do something. After 30 years of development, SHIELD had grown ever larger and more powerful, even moving from underground to above ground, now openly before the public. Naturally, this also brought SHIELD under scrutiny from around the world. After all, SHIELD's capabilities were unimaginable, and no country could trust them completely. Alex had visited headquarters several times, but each time was a rush, never giving him a chance to truly explore it. Taking advantage of his free time, Alex didn't go directly to Nick's office, but instead wandered around SHIELD headquarters. To avoid drawing attention and causing trouble, Alex chose to remain invisible. SHIELD headquarters, modeled after the Pentagon, appeared small from the outside, but vast within. Beyond the 5 floors above ground, the secrets lay beneath. An hour had slipped by unnoticed as Alex wandered around and looked around. Alex's interest had completely faded. "Forget it, let's go find Nick," he muttered, teleporting to Nick's office. Because his invisibility hadn't yet been lifted, Alex's appearance went unnoticed by Nick. Watching Nick reading a document, Alex suddenly felt a prank. With a quiet chuckle, he cautiously moved behind Nick. Despite his invisibility, Alex knew Nick's instincts and knew he'd be spotted if he wasn't careful. After a long delay, Alex finally approached Nick. Just as Alex was about to make his move, the office door suddenly opened, and Natasha, scantily clad, entered with a catwalk. Back, Nick looked up at Natasha, a gleam in his single eye. What's going on with the Soviet Union? While the Soviet Union no longer existed, many people still refer to it as such out of habit. Natasha glanced at Nick, her lips curled slightly as she stared behind him, remaining silent. What? Nick turned his head in confusion, but just as he opened his mouth, he suddenly noticed someone behind him. His face tensed, and just as he was about to attack, he immediately recognized Alex and angrily yelled, "When did you get here, boy?" Alex shrugged, not answering Nick's question. Turning to Natasha, he asked in surprise, "Natasha, how did you find me?" Intuition. Natasha slowly walked over to the leather sofa and sat down, a delighted smile on her face. "Even though we haven't seen each other for decades, I still felt it. Just like all these years, I always knew you weren't dead." Natasha had known Alex was back, but she had been on a mission in the Soviet Union for the past 6 months, and only returned today, making it their first meeting in decades. "You're amazing." Alex gave him a thumbs up, a look of admiration. Seeing that the two stopped, Nick asked about the business. "Natasha, the Soviet Union suddenly collapsed. Have you found out what happened?" In 1991, the Soviet Union suddenly collapsed. The collapse of the once Red Empire shocked the world. No one knew why this once powerful empire suddenly collapsed. In order to investigate, Nick specially sent Natasha. It took several years, and today there is finally a result. Hydra plays an important role in this. Natasha took a breath and said slowly, her face a little heavy. But in a moment, Natasha's expression became a little confused again, as if she was troubled by some problem. Natasha's words made Nick and Alex a little dumbfounded. When did Hydra become so powerful? Chapter 283, Complex Roots. The power of Hydra has far exceeded our imagination. Natasha looked at Nick with complicated eyes, and her expression was a little bitter. We have been too relaxed with them over the years. Seeing Natasha speak so seriously, Nick's face turned ugly and he became more and more confused. He stared at Natasha for a long time and asked seriously, "What's the matter?" In fact, my investigation did not get any conclusive evidence. As soon as she opened her mouth, Natasha broke out a piece of news that made Nick and Alex unbelievable. Without waiting for the two to ask, Natasha explained to herself. However, through some clues, it can be seen that before the collapse of the Soviet Union, all important functional departments of the entire Soviet government and army were actually controlled by Hydra. Alex and Nick looked at each other, their faces full of awe. Natasha, seemingly intent on shocking Alex and Nick, unleashed a barrage of shocking news. And I have reason to believe that not only the Soviet Union, but other nations on Earth are also very likely to be infiltrated by Hydra, including the United States. Natasha paused, glanced at Alex, then turned to stare at Nick, adding, "Even SHIELD, does the Red Skull have that capability?" Alex was surprised, but more than that, skeptical. If Hydra truly possessed such power, World War II would have ended differently than it did in history. Times have changed, and so have people's aspirations. Natasha turned to Alex, her beautiful face filled with bitterness. Hydra's influence is beyond imagination. It's all too easy for them to control a person. Alex was stunned at first, then his reaction dawned on him. His expression darkened, and his mind drifted back to the sheer empire and the swordsmen who lived for honor. What does Hydra want to do? After Natasha and Alex fell silent, Nick, who had been silent the entire time, suddenly spoke up, a gleam in his single eye. Alex immediately realized that no matter how powerful Hydra was, the key was why they wanted the Soviet Union to collapse. Unexpectedly, Natasha shook her head, a look of frustration on her face. "I don't know. I haven't had time to investigate further. It's like the Hydra people have vanished from the face of the earth. There's no trace of anything. Leave it to me." After a moment's hesitation, Alex took the initiative and took the responsibility. "I'm curious too. What exactly does Red Skull want to do?" Nick and Natasha exchanged glances and shook their heads in rejection. "It's best for the X-Men not to get involved in this." "Why?" Alex looked at them with a puzzled expression. Alex believed they were both aware of his thoughts and simply wanted to know the reason, without any other concerns. Alex, we know exactly what you're thinking, Nick pondered for a moment before explaining. You're in a precarious situation right now. If you can, hide. How can you expose yourself? After a pause, Nick added, besides, Magneto, the Hellfire Club, and the Anti-Mutant Association are all looking for trouble with you. For the past 6 months, Alex had spent much of his time accompanying Emma on matters related to the mutant home. After the massacre, the mutant home suffered heavy damage, its strength reduced to an all-time low, and for the past few years, it had been confined to Alex City. I'll take action myself, Alex thought for a moment, a sneer crossing his face as he whispered sinisterly. After over 6 months of rest, Alex felt it was time to make his own move, to announce his return to the world. Don't make a big deal out of this, Alex had barely finished speaking when Nick couldn't help but warn him. It's said that Professor Stryker is planning to develop a robot specifically for mutants. He's just waiting for mutants to cause trouble so he can gain government support. Sentinels. Alex's body trembled, and he looked at Nick in disbelief. As far as Alex knew, the only robot specifically for mutants was the Sentinel, developed by the dwarf Stryker. Furthermore, in X-Men, Days of Future Past, the Sentinel became practically the ultimate weapon for the extermination of mutants, unstoppable by any mutant. Thinking back to the apocalyptic scenes in the film, Alex felt compelled to do something, especially with the Anti-Mutant Society led by Stryker, and of course, Magneto and the Hellfire Club. After making his promise, Alex said his goodbyes and left SHIELD. He locked onto the psychic mark with his telekinesis and appeared beside the one-eyed figure. This one eye wasn't the same one eye. The man before him was Baron Strucker, whose eye was a strangely shaped one, resembling a small magnifying glass worn to create jewelry. To control Hydra, Alex had implanted a mind mark on Strucker, allowing him to appear at his side at any time and in any place. You're back. To Alex's surprise, Strucker didn't seem nervous at all at Alex's sudden appearance. Instead, he casually chatted. Alex frowned slightly, then relaxed again, offering a subtle smile. He casually replied, I'm back, and I'm here to settle some old scores. Strucker bore primary responsibility for the destruction of the savage land. You won't stand a chance, Strucker sneered, slowly standing up and shouting in a deep voice, come. With Strucker's shout, dozens of people suddenly swarmed out, surrounding Alex. Each one looked extraordinary, their aura unmatched. Furthermore, after Strucker's shout, Alex felt as if the space around him had solidified, and his telepathic transmission was severely hindered. But it was only a hindrance. Alex was no longer the same person he once was. The restrictions that once left him helpless were now merely a nuisance. Completely trapping him was impossible. Alex checked to make sure the teleportation was clear. Then, calmly gazing at Strucker, who had somehow hidden himself in the crowd, he said teasingly, Strucker, do you think you can stop me with these people? Strucker ignored Alex's sarcasm, snorted softly, and ordered his men to kill Alex. But Strucker soon discovered he was wrong, utterly wrong. 30 years ago, Alex was invincible. 30 years later, Alex's abilities had been vastly improved. Not to mention teleportation, the permanent effects of his copying abilities were enough to allow Alex to roam the earth. How could a mere Strucker harm Alex? Even more men would be useless. With a single steel ball, Alex effortlessly dispatched Strucker's men, leaving only Strucker standing. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284 Brawl. Alex, long time no see. Just as Alex was about to strike and annihilate Strucker, another voice echoed from behind him, its sinister tone sending shivers down his spine. Though his mind was distracted, Alex's movements were unwavering. The steel ball transformed into a thin blade, swiftly sweeping towards Strucker's neck. 30 years of mutation had taught Alex a profound lesson. If you don't remove the root of the problem, there will be endless trouble. Had he dealt with Red Skull, Sebastian Shaw, and the others, the mutant family might not have suffered these 30 years of misery. Alex's attack was fierce, but Strucker was not without his strength. Taking advantage of Alex's distraction, he dodged the steel ball's blade at the cost of his right arm and fled. Seeing his attack fail, Alex, though discontented, let it go for now and turned to look at the person behind him. Wow, Quite a few have arrived. Alex was stunned when he turned around and noticed more than one person behind him. Then, with a faint smile, he greeted with a hint of teasing, "Red Skull, Sebastian Shaw." As he called out, Alex's eyes scanned the crowd, finally settling on the last person. His voice paused, a complex expression on his face. Eric, now Magneto, glanced at Alex expressionlessly, then turned away as if nothing had happened, never looking back. After staring at Magneto for a moment, Alex sighed softly and looked away with a look of sorrow at the Black Queen, standing beside Sebastian Shaw. His calm face suddenly turned to rage, and his dark eyes shone bloodshot. "Black Queen," he shouted the name through gritted teeth, and without a pause, Alex appeared beside the Black Queen in a flash. Alex remained calm towards Red Skull and Sebastian Shaw. But Alex truly desired to tear the Black Queen's skin and shred her bones. 30 years of grudges meant he wouldn't hold back. Alex raised his hand and grabbed her. Before the Black Queen could even react, her slender neck was already in his grasp, hoisting her high into the air. "Alex!" Sebastian Shaw roared, charging forward, calling out to the others around him, "Everyone, attack! We must take him down." Red Skull and Magneto exchanged glances of surprise. They hadn't expected Alex to be so fierce, even impulsive. As they hesitated, Sebastian Shaw's voice rang out again, accompanied by the Black Queen's panicked scream, "Hurry up, both of you! Do you want to die?" Sebastian Shaw's shout and the Black Queen's shrill screams brought Red Skull and Magneto to their senses. Turning to look, they saw that while the Black Queen had escaped Alex's grip, she remained firmly restrained, unable to move. Sebastian Shaw was in even worse shape, practically outmatched by Alex and forced to resort to passive defense. Seeing this, Red Skull and Magneto panicked, not wasting any time before charging forward. Furthermore, the ambushers, previously positioned in the shadows, emerged at their shouts. In an instant, nearly 100 individuals, including mutants and Hydra soldiers armed with bizarre weapons, surrounded Alex like ants wrapped around a delicious meal, unleashing a barrage of attacks. Alex wasn't afraid of the mutants' attacks, whether energy or physical, his abilities posed no threat. It was the Hydra soldiers Red Skull had brought with him that worried Alex even more. The Marvel Universe is primarily a science fiction universe. While its various superpowers are impressive, it's fundamentally based on technology. Take the Nova Empire, for example. Relying on a single supercomputer, they forged the Nova Core, a force that has always dominated the universe. This is the power of technology. However, Alex's worries proved unfounded. After a few careful encounters, he discovered that while the Hydra soldiers' weapons were indeed powerful and a source of some distress, they couldn't truly harm him. At best, they could only tickle him. Alex's confirmation, and Red Skull's as well, brought a sudden, agonizing expression to his face. These weapons, painstakingly crafted by Red Skull and Hydra, were ultimately rendered completely useless, a sight that would have been mortifying to anyone. Not only was Red Skull mortified, but Sebastian Shaw and the Black Queen were also distressed. They had always held themselves in high esteem, never taking other mutants seriously. But now, they realized, there's always someone better than you. Even combined, they were powerless against Alex. The only person who could pose a threat to Alex was perhaps Magneto. Alex's body could absorb energy, but Magneto's magnetic field would weaken it. If Magneto attacked him again, he would likely be completely defeated. Fortunately, Alex also possessed the ability to control magnetic fields. With the two counteracting each other, Alex felt a sense of relief, though vigilance was essential. Faced with this situation, both Red Skull and Sebastian Shaw were tempted to evacuate. They exchanged glances and secretly made plans. Alex's telepathy couldn't discern their thoughts, but he could still discern something from their eyes and expressions. "What, you want to leave?" With a cold snort, Alex's energy surged. A beam of energy, copied from Alex's own, shot out from Alex like a sphere before exploding rapidly. Alex had been accumulating energy, but now it suddenly erupted. The sheer force of the energy was beyond anyone's expectations. Red Skull, Sebastian Shaw, and the others were the first to bear the brunt of the impact, being flung back into the air. Fortunately, their bodies were resilient, and they only sustained serious injuries, narrowly saving their lives. But the Hydra soldiers were in a miserable state. They were ordinary people and could not survive the impact. They exploded like exploding balloons, and the scene was a mess of blood and flesh. Red Skull made a quick decision and without saying a word, took advantage of the momentum of his body flying backwards and quickly escaped. I don't know what means he used, but he disappeared in the blink of an eye. When Alex reacted, he could no longer find any trace of him. At the moment when Red Skull chose to escape, Sebastian Shaw and Black Queen also made a choice. With the help of a teleporter, they left the battlefield in the blink of an eye, taking away most of the mutants. In just a breath, only a few people were left on the originally tragic battlefield. Alex was one, and Magneto was another. Chapter 285 Supreme Evolution. Now, we can talk. Disappointed after losing track of Red Skull, Sebastian Shaw, and the others, Alex turned his attention to Magneto, the only one left. Frustrated, Magneto glared at Alex with rage and demanded, "There's nothing to discuss between us." In reality, Magneto had already prepared to flee the moment he realized the situation was amiss, even before Red Skull made his move. Unfortunately, as Magneto prepared to flee, he found himself seemingly locked in Alex's grasp, unable to escape. "Eric, come back." Alex stared at Magneto for a long, serious moment. With a sneer, Magneto turned away, pretending not to hear. Alex had always harbored regret for Magneto. Magneto had endured many hardships in his childhood, and his hatred for humanity had been ingrained there. Had Alex taken a little more care of Eric, perhaps the Magneto he is today wouldn't be. Alex pondered for a moment, his thoughts racing. He opened his mouth to continue his persuasion. Before Alex could speak, Magneto rudely interrupted him, "Fight me if you want. If not, let me go." "I'm sorry, Eric." Alex's face darkened slightly, and he shook his head. "I'm back, and I won't let you threaten mutants again. Humans are the threat to mutants." Seeing Magneto roaring with a ferocious expression, Alex tactfully shut up. He didn't have the confidence to convince the paranoid Magneto. With a wave of his hand, an invisible rope bound Magneto, a testament to Alex's masterful control of energy. "Come back with me and reflect on your actions." Eric was different after all. Alex couldn't bring himself to kill him, but he couldn't let him go either. So, Alex decided to imprison Magneto for life. Magneto, as if foreseeing his own end, suddenly became agitated and struggled hard. But Magneto didn't even understand what Alex had trapped him with, so how could he break free? He could only watch helplessly as Alex dragged him away at a rapid speed. The reason Alex didn't immediately teleport away was because he had discovered something interesting. Just as Alex and Red Skull and the others were engaged in a fierce battle, there was another person outside the battlefield. This person wasn't a mutant. At first glance, he looked just like an ordinary person, but Alex noticed something familiar about him that piqued his interest. However, when Alex cleared the battlefield and returned to look for the person, he discovered he had lost all trace of him. Even with Alex's telekinetic power, which could cover the entire solar system, he still couldn't find him. "Interesting," Alex muttered, glancing around, and teleported Magneto back to Alex City. Shortly after Alex left, a figure slowly emerged from thin air, less than 50 meters from where he had just stood. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he muttered, "Amazing. We almost got discovered." After a few incessant complaints, the figure suddenly shuddered and froze in place, as if struck by acupressure points. Their eyes stared intently at what lay ahead, their face filled with terror. "Who are you?" Alex returned, looking at the figure with a calm smile, a hint of confusion in his eyes. The middle-aged man looked ordinary, nothing special, but Alex sensed an aura remarkably similar to Adam's. Alex felt they were one and the same. The middle-aged man watched Alex approach, took a step back, lost his balance, and fell backwards, his face awash in panic, his voice piercing with screams. Alex looked at the middle-aged man with a calm expression as he fell to the ground. His brows furrowed slightly, and a hint of surprise flashed in the depths of his eyes. The middle-aged man thrashed on the ground for a while, and finally stood up. He looked at Alex, who was standing a few steps away, with a timid look on his face. His eyes were a little evasive, as if he was trying hard to hide something. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you." Alex didn't pay attention to the middle-aged man's eyes. He smiled calmly and explained, "I just think you look like a friend of mine. There's nothing else to it." The middle-aged man was stunned when he heard this, and there was deep suspicion in his light blue pupils. He didn't believe that a superpower like Alex would be so boring. Seeing the middle-aged man's expression, Alex shrugged, a hint of confusion mixed with a hint of curiosity. "You two don't look anything alike, but you strike me as very similar to him." He paused briefly, as if weighing his words, before finally speaking with remarkable certainty. "I feel like you and him are the same type." The middle-aged man froze for a moment, then a flash of inspiration struck his mind, and his expression shifted, but it was fleeting, returning to a state of dullness. The rapid shift in expression didn't escape Alex's attention. Curious, Alex couldn't help but use his telepathy to sense the middle-aged man's thoughts. The result left Alex stunned and filled with deep admiration for the middle-aged man. "It's a bit presumptuous, but I have to say, you're truly amazing." After recognizing the similarities between the middle-aged man and Adam, Alex didn't linger any longer. He left a message and teleported away. Watching Alex disappear once more, the middle-aged man's expression darkened. Not daring to pause for a moment, he quickly fled down the mountain, disappearing into the depths of the forest in an instant. Returning to Alex City, Alex unexpectedly saw a few familiar faces and greeted them with joy. "Charles, Alex, hello." When Alex returned, Charles and his companions were training with the new recruits in the wilderness, having only just returned today. Alex, hello. Charles, still bald and wheelchair-bound, presented an elegant appearance and a distinguished demeanor. Hearing Alex's greeting, Charles smiled in response. "What happened? You seemed so hurried just now." "I met a very interesting person," Alex replied casually, briefly explaining the middle-aged man's situation, his words filled with admiration. "You are not talking about the supreme evolution." The more Charles listened, the more familiar it seemed, and the expression on his face gradually became serious. "As far as I know, he is a crazy geneticist." Alex shook his head when he heard this, with a look of disapproval. "Although he is indeed a little crazy, what he did is really great." "Well, we have to admit that his research on genetics is an absolute authority." Charles nodded bitterly to express his acknowledgement, but still objected very firmly. "However, his delusion is really crazy." "Delusion? What?" Alex did not thoroughly delve into the consciousness of the supreme evolution, and did not know much. At this moment, he was a little surprised to hear what Charles said. Charles looked at Alex in surprise, then suddenly understood, and explained. "So you didn't know?" He chuckled again and began to explain. "The supreme evolutionary believes that Earthlings are imperfect and has always wanted all of Earthlings to evolve to a higher level." "Well, that's really crazy." Alex paused, then sighed. "And it's also very dangerous. Without pressure, there's no motivation. Once relaxed, I almost don't want to move, and the longer I'm idle, the less I want to write." After deep reflection, Scorpio decided that he must work harder and harder. "P.S. I've been searching for the name of the supreme evolutionary all night, but to no avail. If any friends know, please let Scorpio know. My OCD is acting up. I don't know if I'm uncomfortable." Chapter 286 Gene Bomb. "There's something even crazier," Charles sighed, his expression grim as he looked at Alex. "Rumor has it he's planning to create a genetic bomb and elevate all of humanity to the next level." "What? He's already doing that?" Alex, upon first meeting the supreme evolutionary, assumed he was still in the early stages of genetic research. He had no idea he'd already embarked on such a madcap plan. Charles nodded and spoke, "But Emma interrupted. In fact, he's long been on SHIELD's dangerous list and is wanted worldwide." "No, I have to go back and find him," Alex said, then vanished. In an instant, Alex reappeared, a grim expression on his face. It was clear he hadn't found the supreme evolutionary. The supreme evolutionary can control and modify his own genetic sequence, making it impossible for anyone to track him. Seeing Alex's face filled with regret, Emma forced a smile and patted Alex's shoulder, comforting him. "The supreme evolutionary isn't our concern. Let's think about how to deal with the Brotherhood of Mutants." With Magneto captured, the Brotherhood of Mutants would never let this go. The Brotherhood of Mutants today is no longer the small Brotherhood of Mutants of 30 years ago. After 30 years of continuous expansion led by Magneto and his men, the Brotherhood's influence has far surpassed that of the House of Mutants. The Brotherhood of Mutants, Charles, having just returned and unaware of Alex's capture of Magneto, glanced at Emma with some confusion, then turned to Alex with a look of concern. Did Alex do something? With the House of Mutants' current capabilities, they couldn't even protect themselves, let alone provoke other factions. That would be a surefire way to avoid defeat. "No, we just happened to capture Eric." Alex briefly recounted the events, a frown forming on his face. Only then did Alex realize that the house hadn't done anything good, but had instead caused trouble. After 6 months of contact, Alex had a deep understanding of the hardships the House of Mutants had endured over the past 30 years. To say they were destitute was an understatement. Alex wanted to change things, but the other forces were already entrenched. Even if Alex had the power to conquer the universe, he couldn't do anything. He couldn't just wipe them out. At worst, we'll fight to the death. Little Rollo Dakin glanced at Emma, his eyes flashing. He waved his hands, his bony claws extended, and roared in righteous indignation, his rugged face, like his father Wolverine's, brimming with fierceness. We're not afraid of them. Dakin's words met with no response. Even the fiery Wolverine sighed in frustration but remained silent. The House of Mutants was truly too weak to withstand any further attack. Alex glanced at the crowd, finally letting out a silent sigh. He shook his head and said, "Forget it, I'll go check on Eric." Leaving everyone behind once again, Alex headed straight for the special prison where Eric was being held. Because of Magneto's special abilities, ordinary prisons couldn't hold him, and without the alien tech observation rooms of the Savage Lands, they could only resort to the crude method of isolating all metal. "Eric, have you thought about what to do with humans?" Alex looked at Eric, who was resting with his eyes closed, was silent for a moment, and asked a very unexpected question. "If the world you want is realized, humans are the mainstream of the Earth after all. First of all, you can't kill all humans. Why kill them all?" Eric opened his eyes, with a gleam of light in the depths of his eyes. "If that time really comes, mutants will be the masters of the Earth, and humans will only be servants serving us. Where there is oppression, there will be resistance. Humans will not always be willing to be servants." Alex shook his head and disagreed with Eric's words. "There is a huge gap in numbers between humans and mutants. Quantitative change leads to qualitative change. If there is a real confrontation, mutants will not have the upper hand, then turn them all into mutants." Magneto's face changed, and with a bit of fanaticism, he explained excitedly, "I am researching a technology that can transform humans into mutants. By then, the whole world will be mutants, and there will be no humans anymore." "What? What did you say?" Alex was startled. The Supreme Evolutionary had appeared out of nowhere. Eric's idea bore a striking resemblance to the Supreme Evolutionary's goal of universal human evolution. But Alex quickly recovered, shook his head, and said doubtfully, "Mutants and humans aren't the same species. Only those with the X gene can become mutants." No. Eric denied it repeatedly before Alex could finish. "Humans view mutants as ferocious because they envy our gifts. If they possessed their own extraordinary abilities, they wouldn't hate mutants anymore." As he spoke, Eric suddenly laughed, a triumphant and arrogant laugh. Although he knew Eric's words were not entirely correct and somewhat biased, upon closer reflection, they seemed to hold true. However, reality, actually, the movie itself, showed Alex that Eric's idea was unsuccessful. In the movie, he used the abilities of the Rakshasa Naughty to transform a human, but the transformation proved unsafe, and the congressman vanished without a trace, dissolving into a puddle of water. Supreme Evolution. At that moment, the vague image of the Supreme Evolution suddenly popped up in Alex's mind, surprising him greatly. Eric's method had proven to be a failure, but the Supreme Evolution's gene bomb hadn't been proven yet, so perhaps it could actually allow humanity to evolve. Once the thought formed, it was impossible to erase it. Alex even imagined the Supreme Evolution secretly detonating the gene bomb, and then humanity successfully completing its evolution. Humanity would become a more advanced species, possessing stronger physiques and various special abilities, and humans and mutants could finally coexist peacefully. Imaginations are beautiful, but reality is cruel. As Alex daydreamed, Emma's voice suddenly echoed in his mind, a little panicked. "Alex, come out, what happened?" Alex was puzzled. Could it be that the Brotherhood of Mutants had come so quickly? The gene bomb. The Supreme Evolution has already completed the gene bomb. It could go off at any moment. Really, Alex hadn't expected such a coincidence. Just moments before, his dream had come true. The unexpectedness made him suspicious. As he spoke, Alex had already returned to the surface, his face still filled with surprise. Emma nodded gravely, her expression stern. "It's true. The Supreme Evolution has everything ready on Mount Wandiger. It could go off at any moment." He'd broken his promise. Some habits were hard to break. He was trying to restart. Chapter 287 Apocalypse. "We must stop him, no matter what." Before Alex could speak, Charles, standing beside him, shouted nervously, "If the Supreme Evolutionary detonates the gene bomb, The consequences will be disastrous. Alex nodded non-committally, his brow furrowed slightly. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded and said, "You stay home, I'll go and take a look." Alex was still thinking about his previous thoughts, and he hadn't yet fully decided whether to do this. But no matter what he chose, Alex didn't want the mutant house to interfere. "I'll go too." Alex had just finished speaking when Charles stepped forward with a righteous expression, his eyes filled with determination. Alex opened his mouth to refuse, but he didn't know how to put it. In the end, he nodded in acquiescence, but finally warned, "There are definitely other forces involved. We must not act unless it's absolutely necessary." Charles was slightly startled at this, then nodded and said, "I'm afraid there are not only those who will stop us, but also those who will help us." There were countless lunatics like the Supreme Evolutionary on Earth, so it was normal for someone to assist him. "Let's go take a look first," Alex responded nonchalantly, and then activated teleportation to bring Charles to Wanda Mountain. Wanda Mountain was actually the place where Alex and Sebastian Shaw and others had fought before, which was why the Supreme Evolution appeared there. Wanda Mountain is a branch of the Alps. The main peak is only over 1,000 meters high and is not majestic, but the environment is very good. The mountain is full of towering trees and countless birds and beasts. As soon as Alex appeared with Charles, he felt a sharp gaze shooting at him. Turning his head, he saw a strange-looking guy. He seemed to be wearing a layer of mecha, with only his head exposed. What was even more bizarre was that his skin was a strange blue. "This guy's tough." Alex's eyes narrowed slightly, and with a wary look on his face, he shielded Charles behind him and spoke in a low voice. "And he doesn't look like he's up to no good." Charles glanced at the man, his brows furrowed, his expression becoming serious. "I sense endless carnage in him." Charles suddenly paused, his pupils widening with a hint of fear. "An endless war and death." Alex was only a telepath, not as skilled as Charles in telepathy. Charles, a doctor of psychology, had discovered far more comprehensive and profound insights than Alex. Hearing Charles' words, Alex's heart was stirred. 30 years had passed, and Charles was no longer the young man he once was. He was now second only to Emma in the mutant family and the current leader of the X-Men, possessing both insight and ability. The fact that he could cause Charles to lose his composure showed that this strange individual was truly extraordinary. "Are you mutants?" Just when Alex and Charles were both on guard, the weirdo in their eyes suddenly spoke, his tone a little strange, with a strong sense of unfamiliarity. Alex and Charles looked at each other, both silent, without any response. "I am Apocalypse, the first mutant on Earth." The weirdo raised his hand and pointed at himself, his head exposed outside the mecha full of pride. Alex and Charles looked at each other again, their eyes a little solemn. Both of them were masters of the mind, so they could naturally tell whether what the weirdo said was true or false. The first mutant, no matter what his ability was. The lifespan of thousands of years alone was enough to make Alex and Charles dare not take it lightly. Alex signaled Charles with his eyes, then turned to Apocalypse and said tentatively, "We are indeed mutants. I wonder what you want to do. I just woke up from a deep sleep and felt something was amiss here, so I came to take a look." Apocalypse looked up at Mount Wanda, a hint of confusion on his blue face. He turned to Alex and said, "Since you're here, I guess you know what's going on." Alex didn't hold back, telling him about the Supreme Evolution and the gene bomb, observing Apocalypse's expression as he spoke. As Alex expected, before Alex could finish, Apocalypse's expression changed. He snorted coldly and launched into a barrage of disdain. "Evolution? How can a mere human understand the secrets of evolution? You, follow me to meet this Supreme Evolution." Without giving Alex or Charles a second to refuse, Apocalypse transformed into a streak of light and flew deep into Mount Wanda, disappearing in an instant. Watching Apocalypse disappear, Alex and Charles exchanged a bewildered glance. "Do you want to go?" Charles hesitated. Apocalypse struck him as dangerous, and subconsciously, he didn't want to interact with him. However, the matter of the Supreme Evolution was pressing, leaving him feeling torn between a rock and a hard place. Alex pondered for a moment, then said gravely, "Charles, you go back. I'll go and see for myself." "Well, okay." Charles hesitated briefly before nodding in agreement. While his abilities were powerful, they also had limitations, and continuing to follow wasn't ideal. After sending Charles back, Alex returned to Wonder Mountain alone. To his surprise, there seemed to be a significant increase in the number of people outside, divided into several groups. "Nick, why are you here too?" Alex's telepathic power swept past the others, finally locating a small cabin where a dozen or so people were hiding, including Alex's old acquaintance, Nick Fury, and Natasha, the Black Widow. Nick was planning his battle on a map when this thought suddenly crossed his mind. He was startled at first, then relaxed, a smile breaking across his serious face. With something this big happening, how could we not be here? You can't intervene in this. They're not someone you can handle. Alex, chatting telepathically with Nick, carefully surveyed the other waves of people. They were all familiar faces, the Hellfire Club, Hydra, AIM, every faction Alex knew seemed to be there. Even the Hand, with whom Alex had a few encounters, had come. Nick Fury, perceptive in his words, suddenly stood up from his chair. He knew about the other factions, but the they Alex was referring to clearly wasn't these people. Here comes an old fogey, I'm afraid he'll be tough to deal with, Alex joked as he told Apocalypse about him. Earth's first mutant, a 5,000-year-old monster, 5,000 years, Nick Fury's face darkened, and he shouted, not caring about the others present. Then, realizing it, he immediately asked, is he really that powerful? Hearing this question, Alex fell silent. In truth, he had no idea of Apocalypse's abilities or strength, but his intuition told him that he was truly dangerous. I don't know either, Alex's voice finally echoed in his head, just as Nick Fury was growing impatient. But I can tell you, I'm a little afraid of him. Ideals are beautiful, but reality is bleak. Scorpio feels guilty. Chapter 288 Monster. Alex had never felt the slightest fear in the face of Thanos, the unstoppable force that dominated the universe. But when he encountered Apocalypse, Alex was inexplicably terrified, as if he had met his nemesis, a force to be reckoned with. It seemed a little unreasonable, but that was how Apocalypse felt to Alex. Meanwhile, Nick Fury was completely stunned. After a long pause, he asked in disbelief, Alex, are you telling the truth? Go back. Stay out of this, Alex said, his face bitter, and he shook his head, his mood somewhat subdued. Nick and Alex were communicating telepathically. The others around him had no idea what Nick was doing. They watched him stand up, sit down again, and occasionally scream and utter incomprehensible words. They looked at each other, bewildered. Only Natasha had a vague understanding. Noticing Nick's pale face, she asked with concern, Nick, what's wrong? Hearing Natasha's cry, Nick snapped back to his senses and looked around, his eyes filled with struggle. Did you know something? Seeing Nick's expression, Natasha's face immediately turned serious. She leaned over to Nick, staring into his single eye, and said in a low voice, Alex told you something. Don't try to hide it from me. Nick turned his head to look at Natasha, and just as he was about to speak, he saw Natasha's eyes suddenly widen with horror. Slightly startled, Nick immediately realized that Alex must have revealed the matter to Natasha. You guys leave, I'll stay. Natasha paused for a moment before finally calming herself down. Frowning slightly, she pondered for a moment, at least one person has to stay here. This is SHIELD's responsibility. Nick nodded, then shook his head. Everyone else, leave. You and I will stay. Without giving Natasha a chance to reason, Nick added firmly, that's an order, forget it. If you want to stay, then stay. As Natasha and Nick confronted each other, neither willing to give in, Alex intervened, somewhat helplessly. With me here, keeping you safe won't be a problem. Alex's words immediately brought a sigh of relief to Natasha. She shrugged and sank back into her chair, lost in thought. The rest was up to Director Nick. In a matter of moments, all the SHIELD personnel had withdrawn, leaving only Nick and Natasha, along with a young man carrying a quiver and clutching a black metal bow. Clint, you really don't have to stay. Nick looked at the young man beside him, looking like he was in a state of panic. The young man, Clint, raised his left hand, clutching the metal bow, and stole a glance at the composed Natasha beside him. He answered the question irrelevantly, as if to demonstrate his loyalty. His expression was resolute, his eyes blazing with fire. With me, Clint Barton, here, no one can harm you. If he wants to stay, then stay. If he dies, it's none of our business. Nick was about to persuade her further, but Natasha suddenly spoke with an indifferent expression. Nick rolled his one eye, speechless. Inwardly, he couldn't help but complain. If it weren't for this guy's feelings for you, I wouldn't bother with him. What's going on? Alex, who had been watching Nick's situation, immediately noticed something unusual about Natasha and the archer named Clint. Nick seemed to have found an outlet, pouring out his frustrations. What's this kid capable of? Natasha was one of Alex's few friends, and she immediately took him seriously, determined to put him on the spot. Archery, Nick replied, then added, masterful. Alex was about to ask more questions when he suddenly sensed an unusual energy fluctuation within Mount Wondag. His expression suddenly changed, and without paying attention to anything else, he uttered a word and immediately headed deeper into the forest. Be careful, they might be fighting. Nick's expression changed upon hearing Alex's message. He turned to look at Natasha and Clint, took a deep breath, and said slowly, let's go. As Alex sensed the energy fluctuations deep within Mount Wondag, other forces at the foot of the mountain also noticed the anomaly. Instantly, groups of troops emerged, heading into the mountains from all directions. Although all the forces were exposed, due to their respective concerns, no conflict broke out, and they continued their journey to their destination peacefully. Alex was much faster than the others, rushing to the side of the unusual energy fluctuations. Contrary to Alex's expectations, the fluctuations weren't caused by the battle between Apocalypse and the Supreme Evolutionary, but by a massive rocket perched in the center of the valley, more precisely, a bomb atop it. This bomb, undeniably, was the Supreme Evolutionary's genetic bomb. Without even paying attention to the vanishing Apocalypse and the Supreme Evolutionary, Alex immediately appeared atop the rocket, ready to dismantle the bomb. Alex had changed his mind after seeing his friends, Nick and Natasha. A genetic bomb might indeed enable humanity to enter a higher evolutionary stage, but there was no guarantee of success, nor a 100% chance of success. Alex didn't want to lose his friends over a bomb. However, before Alex could reach out, a gray figure suddenly appeared, swooping down and yanking Alex from the rocket's summit. He then rolled a long way to the ground before coming to a stop. Unrelated sentence fragment, no mistake, one song, one post, one content, 1/6, one book, one forum, one look. Alex's mind was dazed for a moment, and only when he came to a stop did he slowly regain his composure. He looked closely and realized that the gray shadow on his body was actually a monster, half human, half wolf, remarkably resembling the werewolves that later appeared in the movies. While Alex was still pondering how the werewolf had appeared, the werewolf on him swung its claws at him. Alex was, after all, a formidable figure who had fought Thanos to an equal footing. His abilities and physical prowess surpassed those of ordinary humans. Even a real werewolf couldn't match him. He had merely been careless. Now alert, he dove headfirst, flipping over and sending the werewolf flying. The werewolf, incredibly agile, maneuvered midair and landed steadily on the ground, its gray-green eyes fixed on Alex. Werewolf or not, I'm not interested in playing with you right now, Alex muttered, glancing at the werewolf, then froze it in place and charged toward the genetic bomb once more. But what greeted Alex wasn't a genetic bomb, but a pack of werewolves and a dozen or so unknown birdmen. Yes, birdmen, humanoid monsters soaring through the air. Alex stared at the monsters in disbelief. A sudden thought, could it be that these monsters were all created by the Supreme Evolution? It's no wonder Alex thought so. The Supreme Evolution was a geneticist and a lunatic, so creating these inhuman monsters was perfectly natural. Whatever you are, get out of my way, Scorpio, struggling to recover. Meant business this time. Chapter 289. The crisis is temporarily resolved. Alex unleashed a devastating blow, his first strike ablaze. Red energy beams blazed across the field like machine gun bullets. However, to Alex's surprise, the powerful energy beams had no effect on the werewolves and birdmen. At most, they merely blocked their movements, without inflicting any harm. Alex hadn't anticipated this outcome. His sure-win attacks had all failed, and by the time he could react, it was too late. A dozen werewolves leaped up from all sides, while dozens more birdmen swooped down with fierce, shrieking cries. Instantly, Alex felt a wolf claw strike his shoulder. The intense pain wiped out his entire arm, halting the counterattack Alex had just prepared. Though the pause was brief, it was followed by a torrent of wolf claws and bird pounces. Protected by energy absorption, Alex was unfazed by the attacks. The key was the werewolves and birdmen's incredibly fast attacks, consistently hitting Alex's target, forcing his counterattacks to be interrupted. After enduring for several minutes, Alex finally adjusted to their rhythm and launched a counterattack. The werewolves and birdmen's peculiar constitutions meant that the energy beams couldn't harm them, so Alex opted for a steel ball attack. Under Alex's control, A dozen steel balls transformed into streams of light, piercing body after body with unstoppable force, like piercing thin paper, leaving behind strings of crimson blood. In a flash, the werewolves, along with dozens of birdmen, were reduced to corpses, collapsing on the ground. The blood from the bullet holes quickly dyed the grass a vibrant crimson. Having dealt with these monsters, Alex turned to the rocket. With a resounding bang, a burst of flame erupted from the tail of the rocket, and the massive rocket slowly ascended into the sky. Stop! Alex's face changed drastically. With a low shout, he appeared at the bottom of the rocket. While using the magnetic field to curb the speed of the rocket, he stretched out his hands to frantically absorb the energy ejected from the bottom of the rocket. The impact of the rocket was so strong that even the magnetic field that Alex tried his best to maintain seemed to be unable to control it. For this reason, Alex had to concentrate most of his energy to maintain the stability of the magnetic field. Just as Alex and the rocket were in a stalemate, countless monsters suddenly appeared around them. They looked like orcs transformed from various animals, densely filling the entire mountain forest. There was no doubt that these orc monsters were the hands of the Supreme Evolution. Alex noticed these orcs at the first moment, but he was unable to distract himself and could only watch them approach. "Alex, we're here to help you." Just when Alex was at his wit's end, Nick's voice suddenly reached his ears. Alex looked over and saw Nick and Natasha in front, with the archer named Clinton behind them. The three of them were rushing through the dense orc army like a hot knife through butter, charging towards him. Alex was delighted, but soon frowned again. Because not only Nick and his men had arrived, but Hydra's men had also appeared all around. However, they did not rush into the orc army, but hid far away and watched from the periphery. Nick and his three men were very fast, and they reached Alex in a moment, but they were completely surrounded by countless orc armies, not only on the ground, but also in the sky. "Alex, what are you doing?" Natasha looked at Alex's stiffened form, then at the still flaming rocket, wondering, "Why don't you just destroy it?" "I know you have the ability." Alex was slightly startled, then paused before explaining, "Although the Supreme Evolution's approach is a bit crazy, his research is invaluable and worthy of further study." "How much longer will you take?" Nick, his machine gun firing continuously, turned to Alex, a faint smile on his dark face. "There are too many monsters. We can't hold out for much longer." "Soon," Alex replied, immediately increasing the efficiency of his energy absorption. He wanted to stop the rocket from taking off. Magnetic field suppression was only a temporary solution. Only by absorbing all the rocket's energy, draining it from the source, could the problem be truly resolved. It was unknown what kind of energy the Supreme Evolution had loaded into the rocket, but after so long, the rocket still hadn't shut down, and Alex was getting anxious. Finally, after several minutes, Alex felt the rocket's force begin to wane, and his tense expression softened. "All right," quickly lowering the deactivated rocket to the ground, Alex instantly freed himself. A grin spread across his face, and a roar of laughter erupted. A dozen steel balls transformed into hundreds of thin, sharp blades, flashing a faint silver light as they charged towards the orc army. As Alex freed himself, the onlookers on the periphery finally took action. However, they chose not to charge in, but instead retreated. "Strange," Alex muttered, turning to look at Nick, who had finally relaxed, and asked with a puzzled look, "They hadn't moved just now, and now they're retreating. What's going on?" Nick looked at the retreating figures of Hydra and the others, his single eye narrowing slightly. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "I don't think they were retreating, but they've made another discovery. Look at AIM. They're not leaving the mountain from below, but from inside." Nick pointed at the AIM camp, the group dressed like beekeepers. Alex's heart skipped a beat, and he asked in disbelief, "Supreme Evolution and Apocalypse?" This was the only explanation Alex could come up with, but Alex still didn't understand the motives of Hydra and the others. What are they trying to do now? Gene bombs were never their thing. They wanted humans, the Supreme Evolution. "I think they'll be disappointed." Alex's face lit up at this, a hint of gloating. "The Supreme Evolution won't join them obediently. Besides, there's an apocalypse. They'll have more than enough to deal with. Hurry up, take care of these monsters immediately. We'll get there too." Nick, however, was less relaxed than Alex. With a stern expression, he gave the order, "Whether the Supreme Evolution will join them or not, we must capture it today. The Supreme Evolution is a madman. As long as he remains free, the entire world could be in danger." Alex nodded, continuing to control his blades to harvest the orcs' heads while preparing his ultimate move. He unleashed all the rocket energy he had just absorbed. Under Alex's control, it transformed into a massive flaming tornado, roaring through the mountains and forests. Accompanied by relentless howling, the once densely packed orc army was instantly reduced to ash. Like this, Nick and the other two stared at the scorched earth before them for a moment, then sighed deeply, their faces filled with envy. Clint's expression was particularly pronounced. This was from yesterday, albeit a little late. Chapter 290 Action. Let's go. Alex scanned the devastated forest, confirming no orcs had survived. He immediately activated teleportation, leading Nick and the others deeper into Mount Wandiger. After several teleportations, Alex finally located the battleground between Apocalypse and the Supreme Evolution. As expected, outside the battlefield, Hydra and other forces were lurking, ready to make a move. Alex didn't immediately appear, instead enveloping those who had been waiting there with energy and lurking in the shadows. Is that Apocalypse? Nick immediately noticed a figure in the center of the battlefield, engaged in a fierce battle with the Supreme Evolution. An inexplicable light flickered in his single eye, as if he was worried about something. The power of Apocalypse and the Supreme Evolution was beyond imagination, and the battle was fierce. Trees within a radius of hundreds of meters were completely destroyed, and even the solid rock was shattered, leaving the ground covered in fine stone debris. Alex was also stunned by the battle. He had been prepared for Apocalypse's immense strength. What Alex hadn't expected was that the Supreme Evolutionary, whom he'd only met once, was actually evenly matched, their only difference in combat experience. Should we help? Clint asked cautiously, a hint of excitement as he stood behind the three of them, grabbing a metal bow in one hand. And who should we help? Or should we fight both? Alex glanced sideways at Clint, a smile flickering across his face before shaking his head. No rush, let's see what happens first. The genetic bomb had been dismantled, the danger largely averted, and Alex didn't mind watching the show a little longer. As he finished speaking, Alex looked away and was surprised to see someone approaching the battlefield. They looked like cloaked psychics, though it wasn't clear if they were mutants or something else. Hey, someone's trying to take action, Alex chuckled, his expression gradually becoming serious. He locked onto the cloaked psychic with his telepathic power. Strange, it's Hydra. As he locked onto the psychic, Alex noticed the Hydra insignia on their uniform. Mutants aren't the only ones with superpowers. Natasha, hearing Alex's bewilderment, looked at him with a mixture of laughter and tears. There are many extraordinary individuals among humans, who also possess many special abilities. The Supreme Evolutionary is one of them. Upon hearing Natasha's explanation, the first figure that came to Alex's mind wasn't the Supreme Evolutionary, nor the Mandarin, a fellow human, but the old man with magical powers he'd encountered in the western regions of China. Thinking about it still filled Alex with fear, for the more he learned about the old man, the more he realized his power. Others are taking action. Alex's recollection was interrupted by Nick's exclamation. Turning to look, he saw that the Hellfire Club and the Brotherhood of Mutants had finally given up and were sending in their forces. They were all formidable experts, evident in the immense energy surging from them. In the center of the battlefield, Apocalypse and the Supreme Evolutionary had long been aware of Hydra and the other forces, but seeing they hadn't made any moves, they had ignored them. However, with Hydra and the others acting this way, they could no longer ignore them. Glancing at each other, Apocalypse and the Supreme Evolutionary simultaneously withdrew their attacks. Then swung their weapons around and charged at the onrushing Hydra and his men. This scene was beyond everyone's expectations. No one could have imagined that the two men, who had just been locked in a fierce battle, would peacefully separate. Were they not afraid their opponents would seize the opportunity to attack? But now there was no time for Red Skull and his men to ponder. Seeing Apocalypse and the Supreme Evolutionary charging at them with such force, they had no choice but to fight, to the death. We'll attack too. Alex's face darkened as he watched Red Skull and his men entangled with Apocalypse and the Supreme Evolutionary. He dispelled the energy camouflage that had concealed his presence, shouted softly, and charged forward. A dozen steel balls launched from behind, forming a dense volley of blades that descended upon Apocalypse. In Alex's eyes, Apocalypse was clearly a greater danger than the Supreme Evolutionary. Only after Alex rushed out did Nick and the other two react and rush forward. But young Clint remained bewildered, still unsure why he and the others had rushed forward too. Wouldn't it be better to let them fight amongst themselves? Hydra is no match for those two. If they're wiped out, we'll be in danger. Seeing the surprise on Clint's face, Natasha pulled out a small pistol and attacked the Supreme Evolutionary, explaining to Clint without turning back, the priority now is to contain these two. Alex continued to accelerate the blade formation formed from the steel balls. The dense array of blades, accompanied by bursts of sonic booms, approached Apocalypse at lightning speed. Just as Alex was about to launch another energy blast, the blade formation, which had been under telekinetic control, suddenly lost contact, like a kite with a broken string, completely uncontrollable by Alex. What's going on? Alex, perplexed, peered intently, only to discover that the thin blade seemed to be blocked by something, hovering a meter away from Apocalypse. He can also control magnetic fields. Alex sensed a familiar energy around Apocalypse, a magnetic field. Alex's pace suddenly grew tense, and he slowed his pace. He released several impact beams from a distance, slowly approaching. Before the red impact beams could truly reach Apocalypse, a pale blue, transparent shield suddenly appeared around him. The red impact beam struck the pale blue shield, shimmering with brilliant red and blue light. The shield shook slightly, then calmed down again, and the impact beams vanished, as if nothing had happened. This is a bit tricky. Alex could sense that the pale blue shield surrounding Apocalypse wasn't energy protection, but a force field, a special force field capable of deflecting all energy attacks, and even energy control was powerless against it. The steel balls couldn't get close to Apocalypse, and the energy attacks were deflected. Alex's abilities seemed to be completely suppressed by Apocalypse. He had unparalleled strength, but he posed no threat to Apocalypse. Get close. A new idea immediately popped up in Alex's mind, but when he saw the extremely heavy mecha on Apocalypse, Alex hesitated. As he was staring at Apocalypse in deep thought, Alex's eyes suddenly lit up, and like a searchlight, he locked onto the mecha on Apocalypse. I'm really sorry for yesterday. Scorpio will try his best to make up for it today. This chapter will make up for yesterday's, and there will be another update later in the night. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291 Angry at Apocalypse. Alex wasn't the only one attacking Apocalypse. Several mutants from the Hellfire Club were also attacking. Although Apocalypse parried the mutants' attacks, some of whose secrets were exposed, such as the magnetic field and the force field that transferred his energy attacks, both generated by Apocalypse's mech. Discovering Apocalypse's weakness, Alex's confidence surged. With a faint smile, he teleported directly to Apocalypse, thrusting a fist into his face while his other hand discreetly stabbed his chest. Apocalypse seemed to have anticipated Alex's approach. A sly grin crossed Apocalypse's blue features, a snarl of ferocity laced with his wide grin. Good, very good. With a few whispered words, Apocalypse swung his fist, completely ignoring Alex's attacks. Bang! Two muffled thuds followed, and Alex's fist first struck Apocalypse's head, followed by his other fist. But to Alex's horror, his hands felt like they were hitting cotton, a sensation Alex only experienced during his battle with Sebastian Shaw. Energy absorption, an idea flashed through Alex's mind, and he immediately thought of a possibility. As Alex was surprised, Apocalypse's fist also struck Alex. Apocalypse also noticed Alex's abnormality, and the mockery on his face gradually disappeared, replaced by a hint of praise. Submit to me, and I will give you supreme honor. Dream on, snorted coldly, and Alex's tremendous mental power instantly burst out, transforming into a sharp spike that fiercely pierced Apocalypse's head. With most of his abilities disabled, Alex could only rely on his vast mental power. Once again, Apocalypse also possessed telepathic abilities. Although the quality and quantity of his mental power were inferior to Alex's, it was perfectly sufficient to defend against Alex's attacks. Seeing all his trump cards fail, Alex finally understood why he'd been frightened by Apocalypse. He truly was his nemesis, even more terrifying than Thanos himself. With a silent sigh, Alex surveyed the situation. Under the siege of numerous experts, both Apocalypse and the Supreme Evolutionary held their own with ease, showing no sign of weakness. Instead, they fought with increasing ferocity, gradually gaining the upper hand. I leave this to you, Alex shouted at the onrushing Sebastian Shaw, the Black Queen, and the others then activated teleportation, preparing to abandon Apocalypse and confront the Supreme Evolutionary. Unfortunately, before Alex could react, Apocalypse's counterattack arrived. Want to escape? No way, Apocalypse shouted, his hands extending like rubber bands, and with a grasp, he unexpectedly snatched Alex from the teleportation. Alex forgot to fight back, stunned as Apocalypse grabbed him back. His mind was filled with a single thought: how did Apocalypse get me out? Alex's teleportation wasn't just ordinary teleportation, the kind that relied on moving through a different dimension. It didn't require any medium, though there actually was. Alex wasn't sure yet. The mind projected to a location and instantly teleported there. It was impossible for Alex to be captured mid-transfer, unless something were wrong with him. Seeing Alex captured by Apocalypse, Nick and Natasha, who were locked in a fight with a Supreme Evolutionary, grew nervous. They wanted to fight, but they were helpless. They had no superpowers, and their weapons wouldn't be enough to harm Apocalypse, let alone rescue Alex. "Watch me, Clint," who had been following Nick and Natasha, noticed their expressions and shouted proudly. He reached into his quiver behind him, pulled a feathered arrow, knocked his bow, and fired. The whole process took a fraction of a second, and the black feathered arrow soared out like a flash of black lightning. In a split second, a lightning-fast black feathered arrow pierced through Apocalypse's pale blue force field and magnetic field, miraculously appearing before his forehead, poised to pierce it. The black feathered arrow finally pierced Apocalypse's forehead, then, without losing speed, pierced a hole and flew out from behind. This scene thrilled everyone, from Nick and his companions to the Hellfire Club and other factions. However, Alex, who was held close by Apocalypse, noticed something unusual. Despite such a severe injury, not a single drop of blood had flowed from Apocalypse's wound. More importantly, the thumb-sized hole was healing at a visible speed. In a few breaths, the horrific hole on Apocalypse's forehead disappeared, leaving no trace of the injury. Everyone noticed, their smiles unable to fade as they stared at Apocalypse, who sneered. Alex's face paled. He was held captive by Apocalypse, and he struggled. But Apocalypse's rubber arms, like a python, coiled around him. The more he struggled, the tighter the grip tightened, and his abilities seemed severely restricted, making it impossible for Alex to escape. Now, surrender or die, Apocalypse, holding Alex close to him, ignored the attacks from all around him. His cold eyes fixed on Alex, blood-red pupils concealing endless murderous intent. Or, will you be transformed into an apostle? Alex's body trembled slightly, his face shrouded in a struggle, as if he had difficulty making up his mind. 3, 2, 1, Apocalypse pressed on, even giving a final 3-second countdown. Meanwhile, Nick and Natasha immediately abandoned their supreme evolution and charged forward without hesitation. As for the others, their attacks continued, and no one paused, though everyone kept a close eye on Apocalypse and Alex's movements. As everyone waited anxiously, Alex's expression suddenly turned ferocious, and he roared like thunder, "Die, Apocalypse!" This roar caught everyone by surprise, and even Apocalypse was caught off guard. He stared at Alex in astonishment. Just as he was about to speak, his face suddenly changed color, his blue face turning slightly pale. Before anyone could react, the mecha on Apocalypse suddenly cracked and disintegrated, turning into a pile of scrap metal. "Alex!" Apocalypse roared, his hands suddenly exerting force, as if trying to strangle Alex. However, what no one could have imagined was that even though Alex's body was stretched to the thickness of his arms, he remained alive and kicking, a carefree smile on his head, the only part of his body that remained intact. The two of them stood in a stalemate for a moment, then Alex's expression gradually calmed. With a hint of coldness, he spoke slowly, each word measured. "Now, it's my turn, Apocalypse." As soon as he finished speaking, Alex's stretched, noodle-like body immediately erupted in an endless red light. The blazing light, like a divine weapon forged countless times, unleashed a brilliance that the two could not bear to look directly at. Second update here. Scorpio is really working hard. P.S. Scorpio will continue to work hard today, and strive for a second update. Chapter 292 Apocalypse's defeat. Without the protection of his mech, Apocalypse knew his current body couldn't withstand such a powerful energy surge. Despite his resentment, he could only let go of Alex and teleport away. What surprised Apocalypse even more was the ability Alex had just displayed, demonstrating control over his body that rivaled his own. Freed from Apocalypse's restraints, Alex didn't immediately pursue him, slowly recovering with a delighted smile on his face. Ever since his copied abilities unexpectedly became permanent, Alex's replications seemed to have lost their effectiveness. For decades, Alex hadn't been able to replicate any abilities. But just now, just as Alex felt his body about to be crushed to shreds by Apocalypse, the once familiar electrical current reappeared, and the replication had reappeared. And to Alex's utter delight, the replicated abilities remained permanent. An absolute surprise. After the replication reappeared, Alex immediately prepared to replicate Apocalypse's abilities. But what shocked Alex was the sheer number of abilities Xianqi possessed. Everything he knew, Xianqi seemed to possess. The first attempt to replicate the ability froze, like a computer overloaded and frozen. After some thought, Alex opted for ultimate control over his body, reaching molecular control, allowing him to alter and control his size and form at will. Leveraging this ability, Alex successfully destroyed Xianqi's mecha, freeing himself from his clutches. Despite escaping Xianqi's control, Alex hesitated to pursue him, watching the fleeing Xianqi with a wary expression. Xianqi soon realized Alex wasn't pursuing him, and a flicker of disappointment flashed across his eyes. He then slowly stopped and turned to look at Alex, his expression grave. Through the previous battle, Alex had gained a firm grasp of Xianqi's abilities and strength, and Xianqi had similarly explored Alex's capabilities. With this understanding, Xianqi knew that his own attempt to defeat Alex would be incredibly difficult. "Why don't we cooperate, Alex?" Apocalypse persuaded Alex with a faint smile, his body constantly twisting and transforming. In a flash, a new suit of armor appeared, its dark metallic sheen making it hard to believe it was made from Apocalypse's own body. Alex, who had been watching Apocalypse closely, noticed the change. His eyes narrowed slightly, a bitter taste in his mouth, and he kept muttering to himself, "After all, I defeated Thanos. I never thought I'd be in such a mess today." Seeing Alex's lack of response, Apocalypse took a closer look and found him in a daze. His face darkened, and he took a deep breath, angrily shouting, "Alex!" As soon as he finished speaking, Apocalypse was several steps away from Alex, swiftly swinging his right hand. Before Alex could react, Apocalypse's right hand, like a transformer, transformed into a thick metal rod in the blink of an eye, gleaming with a cold blue light, sweeping across like fallen leaves in the autumn wind. Alex, possessing energy absorption, paid no heed to Apocalypse's attack. However, Alex instinctively defended himself, dodging sideways and leaping out of Apocalypse's range. Seeing Alex leap out, Apocalypse felt a wave of disappointment. He had hoped to lower Alex's guard, then use his grip as a trap to trap him. The most effective way to deal with a psychic with energy-absorbing abilities is to isolate them from the energy source, eliminating any possibility of absorption. Unfortunately, Alex's alertness foiled Apocalypse's plan. Unable to stop him, neither could stop him. Neither of them could give up their rival, and in the end, they could only exchange blows, a joyous exchange, unable to inflict any significant damage. As Alex and Apocalypse resumed their clash, the stunned psychics finally regained their composure and looked at Alex with admiration. Of course, once they recovered, they resumed their attacks, raining down energy attacks, bullets, and other weapons indiscriminately upon Alex and Apocalypse. Faced with the onslaught, both Alex and Apocalypse immediately dodged. This time, unlike the previous attacks, everyone seemed to have unleashed a powerful burst of force. The powerful, instantaneous damage exceeded Alex and Apocalypse's expectations and their physical limits. They were forced to separate and deploy defensive measures, leaving them feeling rather distraught for a moment. This delighted Red Skull and the others, whose attacks intensified. Alex, holding on, gradually adjusted to the situation and was about to turn his gun to eliminate Red Skull and the other attackers, when he turned and noticed that Apocalypse's condition was deteriorating, seemingly weakening. "What's going on?" Alex wondered. He knew Apocalypse's abilities, he had already weathered them, so Apocalypse wouldn't be any problem either. However, Apocalypse's condition was clearly deteriorating, and even his newly constructed mecha was showing signs of damage. Alex observed Apocalypse closely for a while, finally noticing a discrepancy. The energy within his body was decreasing, not increasing, completely unlike any sign of energy absorption. Just as Alex was wondering, he suddenly realized that among Apocalypse's countless attacks, some had unusual properties, seemingly weakening or even blocking his psychic powers. Alex had always believed that any ability required strong psychic power. Without a certain level of psychic power, a user couldn't control their abilities. Furthermore, the stronger the ability, the greater the psychic power. Apocalypse's psychic power was immense, but when it was weakened or even blocked, his ability became increasingly difficult to control, leading to his growing weakness. Alex was also subject to similar attacks, but his psychic power had reached cosmic levels, remaining immensely powerful even with a weakening and blockage. Furthermore, Alex's limited abilities made it easy to control, preventing him from weakening as much as Apocalypse did. Understanding this, Alex immediately abandoned his plans to cause trouble for Red Skull and the others, and focused on taking advantage of the situation to eliminate him. In Alex's eyes, Apocalypse's threat was greater than that of Red Skull and everyone else combined. Apocalypse was already struggling, and with Alex being the last straw that broke the camel's back, Apocalypse immediately decided to leave first. With that thought in mind, Apocalypse didn't even stop for a moment and chose to disappear without even a single harsh word. He left quite decisively. Apocalypse's departure was unexpected, at least Alex hadn't expected this scene to happen, and he was stunned for a long while before he came to his senses. However, as soon as Apocalypse left, the attacks of Red Skull and others were immediately transferred to Alex, even leaving behind the Supreme Evolution. Alex felt the pressure doubled. People, you still can't brag. Chapter 293 The Birth of the X-Men. Everyone's firepower was focused on Alex, instantly unleashing the Supreme Evolution. Glancing at the 2 or 3 kittens around him, the Supreme Evolution's lips curled slightly, his azure eyes gleaming with pride. Take your time, he muttered to himself, then quietly held back, engaging the surrounding kittens, neither fleeing nor defeating them, simply wearing them down. The Supreme Evolution's actions were obvious, and many noticed, even realizing they were secretly preparing something. However, no one paid any attention. Alex paid no attention, while Red Skull and the others chose to ignore them for the time being. Those who wanted to stop the Supreme Evolution, such as Nick and the other two, were powerless. Although Alex possessed the ability to devour energy, facing so many attacks, he was unable to focus for a moment. He had to exert all his might to control the speed of his intake and release, otherwise the exploding energy would overwhelm Alex's body. As the Supreme Evolutionary's smile grew wider, Alex's heart grew heavier, his expression growing increasingly agitated. He turned to Red Skull and the others and roared, "Are you really going to let this madman detonate the genetic bomb?" Before Red Skull and the others could react, Alex's voice erupted like a rapid-fire barrage that would destroy all of humanity, even mutants. Before Red Skull and the others could say anything, the Supreme Evolutionary beside him chuckled and replied, "Whatever your purpose, as long as you save my life and freedom, I will serve him." This statement electrified everyone present. Red Skull and the others had gotten involved in this mess precisely for the Supreme Evolutionary. Alex's situation suddenly became even more precarious, even affecting Nick and the other two. Alex had to distract himself to encircle the 3 of them in his own defense, saving them from tragic death. What do we do now? Clint, still too young, was already pale with nervousness, his head racing, as if he were preparing for an attack from all sides. Nick shrugged, looking at Alex with a relaxed expression. A hint of anticipation glinted in his single eye. "Alex, what do you think? This is a matter of life and death, Alex. Don't even think of slacking off." Natasha smiled at Alex, her expression remarkably relaxed. Alex rolled his eyes speechlessly and said grumpily, "You?" He paused, swallowing the rest of his words before looking at Nick and Natasha seriously. "I'll take you back later. This isn't the place for you." Nick and Natasha exchanged a glance, refusing to refuse. After the recent battle, Nick had a profound understanding of the devastation wrought by superpowered beings. He was already considering whether SHIELD should form a team of superpowered individuals, or at least be able to deal with those criminals, so they wouldn't be left behind. After all, the people brought by Hydra's Red Skull were no match for the mutants. Alex was unaware that Nick was already assembling a superpowered team. Seeing the 2 men deep in thought, he urged them again, "The battle will likely intensify. If you continue to stay here, I'm not sure I can protect you. Send us back." Nick snapped back to reality at the sound of the voice. He looked up at Alex and instructed with the same seriousness, "We must stop the Supreme Evolution." Alex smiled faintly and said confidently, "Don't worry, the X-Men are already clearing out the Supreme Evolution's Orsish team." "X-Men? They're coming." Nick frowned, whispering with some concern, "Will everything be alright?" The X-Men were the last resort of the mutant family. If this last spark of hope was extinguished, the mutant family would be in real danger. Alex looked at Nick gratefully, shook his head, and said, "We've been hiding for too long. It's time to get some fresh air." Since taking refuge in Alex City, the severely weakened mutant family had rarely been seen outside. Alex felt a surge of guilt and frustration. He had long sought an opportunity to restore the mutant home to its former glory, but the chance had been lacking. Now seemed like a perfect opportunity. "What?" Natasha exclaimed, staring intently at him, her face filled with worry. "With the X-Men's current strength, aren't you afraid?" Despite the significant reinforcements, the X-Men still hadn't fully recovered. A rash move would likely backfire. Alex smiled calmly, confident, "Don't worry, I've got it covered." With the exception of a few veteran members, the current X-Men were mostly young, unexperienced in the fiercest of battles. Alex had chosen this moment to emerge, hoping to train the younger members of the X-Men. Seeing Alex's resolve, Nick and Natasha had no choice but to let Alex have his way. Red Skull and his companions continued their attacks. Seeing Alex manage to chat with Nick and Natasha, everyone was surprised and concerned. They were well aware of Alex's immense strength and were already wondering if he had mastered some new, powerful ability. Just as Red Skull and his companions were perplexed, the Supreme Evolutionary suddenly shouted, his face turning grim, "People are coming." Just then, the Supreme Evolutionary finally realized that his orc army was in trouble and was dwindling. "People?" Everyone looked around in surprise, their faces changing dramatically. Only then did they realize that the people standing behind them had collapsed to the ground without them noticing. In the center of the battlefield, Alex's smile widened, his eyes narrowing slightly as he boasted with a look of pride, "Well, isn't that a stunning appearance by the X-Men?" As Alex's voice echoed, mutants in X-Men uniforms materialized from all directions, each young face radiating an unearthly calmness and determination. "Kill!" A cold voice suddenly resounded, and the newly revealed X-Men attacked again, forming into teams of 3 or 5, striking instantly and killing with impunity. In a split second, numerous forces fell. Only then did Red Skull and the others react. Their faces sank, and they glared at the X-Men, their eyes blazing. The Hellfire Club and the Brotherhood of Mutants were particularly surprised. After years of silence, the X-Men could still possess such formidable strength. Although it was suspected of being a sneak attack, Alex was still very pleased with the teamwork ability that the X-Men had just demonstrated. The smile on his face became more and more cheerful. He couldn't help but turn his head to look at Red Skull, Sebastian Shaw and others. "How do you feel, Red Skull, Sebastian Shaw?" New January, new beginning. Chapter 294 The Supreme Evolution is captured. Red Skull and Sebastian Shaw exchanged glances, their faces grim. Neither of them had expected the X-Men to grow so powerful, even surpassing their own forces. As Red Skull and Sebastian Shaw secretly discussed countermeasures, Nick and Natasha, beside Alex, were also bewildered. Due to their special relationship with Alex, they were well aware of the X-Men's strength. While each was exceptionally powerful, their numbers were definitely not as great as those present. "What's going on?" Nick glanced at Alex covertly, his face expressionless, his single eye filled with deep confusion. Alex's smile remained, but he replied telepathically, his voice somewhat ethereal, "Some are illusions, fake." Nick's eye widened at this, and he turned to look at the X-Men, who practically surrounded the entire room, trying to discern the real from the fake, but Alice, he couldn't. To Nick, every one of them was real, so real that he could even feel their breath. Red Skull and the others didn't notice anything unusual. After some discussion, they seemed to have come up with a plan, and Red Skull was pushed out. "What do you want, Alex?" Red Skull's blood-red face remained expressionless as he stared at Alex coldly, never lowering his custom-made pistol. Alex frowned, then smiled nonchalantly, saying, "What if I say I want to seize this opportunity to wipe you out? That depends on whether you have the guts. At worst, we'll both die." Red Skull's sunken eyes twitched, then returned to normal. He looked at Alex calmly and said threateningly, "But, you X-Men probably only have these few left. Without them, we'll be completely gone." The mutant home had suffered a devastating disaster, and the X-Men were devastated. Although they had made significant progress over the past decade, they only had these few left. Their greatest limitation was their population. Any casualties would be a serious blow. But Hydra and the Hellfire Club are different. They have a deeper foundation and a large number of people under their command. Even if this group of people were eliminated, it would only be a small loss. Alex's face changed immediately when he heard this, but he was actually laughing in his heart. He hadn't wanted to confront Red Skull and the others head-on from the beginning, but seeing them take the initiative was just what he wanted. "What do you want?" Alex tried to frown and pretend to be furious, his eyes almost blazing with fire. "Let's each take a step back." Red Skull's face lit up, and he said slowly after a moment's hesitation, "Let us go, and we won't interfere in the affairs of the Supreme Evolution. The Supreme Evolution is certainly important, but compared to his own life, both Red Skull and Sebastian Shaw care more about himself." Alex's expression darkened. After a long hesitation, he sighed and said reluctantly, "Sage, let them go." Sage, possessing a brain as powerful as a computer, was the undisputed leader of the X-Men this time, a fact evident from her position. The expressionless Sage remained silent for a moment before nodding and waving a hand, signaling the X-Men to open a gap. The gap was large, and forces like Hydra and the Hellfire Club immediately swarmed in. Red Skull, Sebastian Shaw, and the others were the first to flee. In just 10 minutes, the vast valley was deserted, leaving only the X-Men and the lone High Evolutionary in the center. In truth, the High Evolutionary had attempted to break free, but under Alex's control. He offered no resistance and could only stand still, awaiting his final judgment. The High Evolutionary was not Apocalypse, nor was he Adam. His genetic modifications were still in the very early stages, primarily focusing on his body. Despite his immense strength, even rivaling Apocalypse, some of his abilities were lacking, such as his telepathic abilities. "Let's go back to." Alex turned and glanced around. His telekinesis instantly enveloped the entire valley, and teleportation was activated, carrying everyone away with him. When they reappeared, they had returned to Alex City. "Charles, very well done." Upon arriving back in Alex City, Alex immediately looked at Charles in the crowd, his face filled with approval. Creating the illusion to intimidate Red Skull and the others was Charles's work, and it had played an invaluable role in completing this mission. Charles smiled softly, pointing to a girl with wings on her back beside him. He modestly said, "It was thanks to the Pixie's illusion dust, combined with my psychic abilities, that we were able to trick them." Alex looked at the girl he called the Pixie. She was petite and adorable, especially with a pair of transparent wings on her back, giving her a truly elf-like look. "Thank you, Pixie." Alex thanked her sincerely. This time, he really had to thank her, or else he would be in real danger. The elf smiled brightly, her pretty face brimming with excitement. "This is what I should do. I'm an X-Man." Alex chuckled, turned to Charles, and earnestly instructed, "Charles, keep an eye on Alex City's defenses. I'm worried they might infiltrate. They don't know we're here yet, but it's best to be cautious." With that, Alex left, carrying the Supreme Evolution. A few steps later, Emma joined them, accompanied by Audrey and the other girls, including Crystal. "Looks like a good catch." Emma breathed a sigh of relief at Alex's safe return. Turning to look at the Supreme Evolution in Alex's grasp, her eyes lit up. "Is this the Supreme Evolution?" Alex nodded, but his brows furrowed unconsciously. He pondered for a moment, looking like he had a headache. Lock him up first and keep him under close watch. Given Alex's current personality, he should eliminate all hidden dangers, and a threat like the Supreme Evolution must absolutely not be allowed to remain. However, Alex was reluctant to let the Supreme Evolutionary go. The Supreme Evolutionary's genetic research was of great significance to mutants, and it was the key that Red Skull, Sebastian Shaw, and others were fighting for. But if you were to use it directly, Alex was worried. The Supreme Evolutionary was not a good person, and if he had any evil intentions, no one could stop him. In desperation, Alex could only lock him up for now. Emma was not surprised at all when she heard this. She also understood the significance of the Supreme Evolutionary. She nodded and began to arrange for someone to take the Supreme Evolutionary away. After watching the Supreme Evolutionary being taken away, Emma sighed softly and said with a wry smile, "Keeping him locked up all the time is not a good idea. Actually, we can send someone to learn secretly." Before Alex could say anything, Charles walked over quickly, explaining as he walked, "The significance of the Supreme Evolutionary is not him as a person, but his rich and extraordinary genetic knowledge. As long as we learn his knowledge." Before Charles could finish, Alex slapped his thigh excitedly and interrupted Charles excitedly, "That's a good idea." The idea was indeed a good one, but unfortunately it eventually triggered a series of unpredictable accidents. Originally, He wanted to strive for perfect attendance, but he didn't expect to be late on the first day. Chapter 295 Visiting Atlan. Having temporarily put the issue of the Supreme Evolutionary aside, Alex didn't relax, knowing the most difficult times were yet to come. On Mount Wandiger, the X-Men had nearly cornered Hydra, the Hellfire Club, and other forces. Given the temperaments of Red Skull and Sebastian Shaw, they wouldn't give up. Crystal, can we mutants enter Atlan? Alex City wasn't safe. For the safety of the vast majority of mutants, and for the future of Mutant Home, Alex had his sights set on the Inhumans. Crystal stood bored beside Emma and the other girls, staring blankly ahead, her thoughts unclear. Suddenly hearing Alex's voice, Crystal snapped back to reality. She raised her hand to lift her hair from her ear, and, blushing, asked, "Alex, what did you just say?" Alex glanced at Crystal speechlessly, shook her head, and repeated her plan. Compared to Alex City, the Inhumans Atlan was clearly safer and more stable. Crystal had originally appeared relaxed, but after hearing Alex's words, her expression grew awkward. After a moment's hesitation, she spoke, "I'm not sure about that. I'll have to ask my brother-in-law and sister," Crystal added, her voice low, as if afraid to speak out loud. Traditionally, Atlan doesn't allow outsiders to enter. Alex wasn't surprised by this. His brow furrowed slightly, and he chuckled softly, saying, "In that case, I'll go talk to Black Bolt." Alex had already visited Atlan since returning to Earth and had several encounters with the current Inhuman King, Black Bolt. "I'll come with you," Crystal shouted eagerly as Alex finished speaking. Then, realizing her own impulsiveness, she quickly composed herself and added seriously, "It'll be better if I'm here to help." Alex nodded without further comment. He turned to Emma, gave her a few words of advice through telepathic communication, and then left Alex City with Crystal. Alex City is actually located beneath Atlan, but Atlan is suspended in midair, protected by a massive shield, making it impossible for ordinary people to discover, let alone enter. Alex, however, was quite familiar with the city, teleporting directly to Atlan's royal quarters. As soon as Alex and Crystal appeared, a massive bulldog materialized out of nowhere. Its massive stature resembled a tiger, its face remarkably ferocious. The sight of it would have been terrifying, especially with its blood-stained mouth, covered in ferocious, interlocking fangs. "Tetanus, it's me." Crystal's face lit up at the sight of the bulldog, and she quickly called out, kneeling down and gently stroking its back. Tetanus was the giant bulldog's name. Upon hearing Crystal's call, the bulldog immediately lay obediently on the ground, enjoying Crystal's massage, its scarlet tongue dripping with saliva. Alex rolled his eyes at Bulldog's apparent enjoyment and raised his foot. "Tetanus, get up. Take us to Black Bolt." While Alex could teleport directly to Black Bolt himself, this was an Inhuman stronghold, and it would be inconvenient for an outsider like Alex. Tetanus glanced at Alex lazily, showing no sign of getting up. Furious, Alex couldn't help but raise his foot again, ready to give the idiot a real thrashing. "Tetanus, we have urgent business with my sister and brother-in-law." Crystal chuckled at Alex's indignation, patting Tetanus with her hand and explaining seriously. Tetanus snorted and slowly stood up. He glared at Alex again, and then something like an antenna emerged from his forehead, flashing with silver light and enveloping both Alex and Crystal. In a flash of silver light, Alex, Crystal, and Tetanus vanished from their original location, reappearing in the true heart of the Inhuman royal family, where Black Bolt and Medusa rested. Tetanus, though merely a dog, possessed remarkable abilities, one of which was teleportation. Teleportation was similar to Alex's telekinesis, but fundamentally different. "Alex, Crystal, what are you doing here?" Upon seeing the two and the dog appear, Medusa, resting from her resting position, immediately turned to look, her face filled with surprise. Without waiting for Alex to explain, Crystal let out a cry of joy and scurried over to Medusa's side. She clasped her arms tightly and coquettishly cried out, "Sister, I missed you so much." As she spoke, Crystal scanned the surroundings. Seeing no sign of her brother-in-law, she couldn't help but ask, "Where's my brother-in-law?" "He's meditating. He needs that method to control the energy within his body," Medusa casually explained. Turning to Alex, she asked, "Tell me, what's going on?" Medusa then glanced at her sister, who was clinging to her tightly, and teased, "Why are you even bothering me?" Crystal blushed slightly at this, and glanced at Alex, not daring to say anything. "Well, this is it," Alex chuckled dryly, then took the lead, stating her thoughts and briefly explaining the whole story. Although Medusa was only the Inhuman Queen, her status within the Inhumans was no less than that of Black Bolt. She even often handled government affairs. The same thing happened with Medusa. "I'm afraid that won't work," Alex said, and Medusa immediately shook her head in refusal, showing no sign of compromise. Crystal tensed at this, clutching Medusa's hand once more, her face greasy as she cried, "Sister, Crystal, stop messing around." Medusa turned to look at her. Under Medusa's sharp, stern gaze, Crystal was powerless and could only retreat in defeat. After resolving Crystal's issue, Medusa turned to Alex and explained earnestly, "Atlan doesn't allow any outsiders to enter. This is an ancestral rule, and even we, as royalty, cannot disobey." Although she had been prepared, Alex was still somewhat disappointed by Medusa's explanation, but she could do nothing about it. While the Inhumans possessed technology far superior to humans, their rigid system and reverence for tradition were incomprehensible. Just as Alex was about to consider other options, Medusa's voice rang out again. "Although Atlan can't let you in, but..." Medusa seemed to be teasing Alex, deliberately pausing for a long time. Just as Alex was about to ask, she continued, "But we can provide you with some technology, Atlan technology. Motivation is still very important. Without the incentive of perfect attendance, Scorpio lost a motivation to write." He hesitated for a long time before starting. Sigh. Chapter 296 An Unexpected Surprise. Alex leaped from his chair upon hearing this, staring at Medusa excitedly, as if he couldn't believe his ears, his voice trembling slightly. Are you telling the truth?" In reality, what Alex wanted most was Atlan's technology. However, Alex knew it was impossible, so he had never mentioned it. But what Alex hadn't expected was that Medusa would actually bring it up. It was truly unexpected. Medusa smiled calmly, nodded, but said nothing, looking at Alex meaningfully. Alex was startled for a moment, then regained his composure and asked, "What do you need us to do?" "There's no such thing as a free lunch." Medusa must have a reason for offering technology, and Alex hoped her request wasn't too outrageous. Supreme evolution, what? Alex turned to look at Crystal, finding her bewildered as well. He was even more astonished, wondering how the Inhumans had learned of the supreme evolution. Alex was well aware of the supreme evolution's role, and equally concerned about the threat it posed. Unless absolutely necessary, Alex preferred to keep the supreme evolution under his own care. Medusa looked at Alex calmly, speaking slowly and confidently, "Technology for technology. Atlan's technology for the supreme evolution. You won't lose out." Clearly, Medusa was determined to obtain the supreme evolution. Seeing Alex still hesitate, Medusa hesitated for a moment, sighed softly, and spoke slowly with a hint of resignation. "The Terrigen Mist has endowed us with all sorts of superpowers, but it has also caused genetic damage and deformities." Medusa paused, stroking her long red hair, a trace of sadness on her face. "To reduce mutations, we have to implement a long-term breeding program. As time goes by, mutations are becoming more frequent, and the Genetics Council is completely helpless." As Medusa spoke in a deep voice, her burgundy hair grew wildly like sprouting grass, covering the ground in an instant. "If this continues, the Inhumans will be threatened with extinction." "Sister, has it really come to this?" Crystal, clearly privy to some of the hidden truth, wasn't overly surprised by the words, her expression slightly gloomy. Medusa nodded, turned to Alex, and waited for his decision. "How can you be sure the Supreme Evolutionary will truly help you?" Alex believed in the Supreme Evolutionary's abilities, but he wasn't sure about his character. "You know, just a few hours ago, he was about to destroy Earth with a genetic bomb. Don't worry about that. We have ways to make him obey." Medusa breathed a sigh of relief, unmindful of Alex's advice. In Medusa's eyes, the Supreme Evolutionary was still just a human, at best, one with some abilities. Alex agreed without saying anything else. "I can hand over the Supreme Evolutionary to you." Alex paused, then quickly added, "But we must share his research findings." Of course, we won't touch the secrets of the Inhumans. Only then did Alex realize he had struck a bargain. The mutant family lacked skilled genetic scientists, and learning the Supreme Evolutionary's knowledge would be a daunting task. However, the Inhumans were no shortage of genetic geniuses, and with this connection, learning would likely be much easier for the mutants. Medusa didn't refuse Alex's request, nodding in agreement. Just as Alex and Medusa were discussing the details, a tall figure emerged from the inner room. His tight-fitting bodysuit accentuated his muscular form. It was none other than Black Bolt, the king of the Inhumans and Medusa's husband. "Hi, Black Bolt, Alex greeted him cheerfully. Black Bolt nodded expressionlessly in response. Alex had anticipated Black Bolt's reaction and chuckled, unconcerned. Black Bolt also possessed the ability to manipulate energy, particularly the ability to generate powerful infrasound waves through sound. To prevent harm to Atlan, Black Bolt had been in prison since childhood, unable even to speak, as even a single breath could cause unimaginable devastation. Black Bolt naturally sat down next to Medusa and turned to look at her. His gaze was barely emoticon, but Medusa instantly understood his meaning. After briefly recounting the situation, Medusa, fearing Black Bolt might object, began explaining with a serious expression, "The supreme evolution is crucial to the Inhumans. We cannot miss this opportunity." Black Bolt paused for a moment and nodded, then frowned again, as if worried. "I know Atlan's secrets must not be exposed to outsiders," Medusa explained, chuckling softly before turning to Alex. "So, I've decided to send our forces to Alex City. What do you think, Alex?" A warm welcome. Alex had no intention of refusing, especially since it was a much more convenient option for him. The conversation was almost over, and Alex was just contemplating whether to return and prepare when Black Bolt suddenly stood up and walked over to him. Alex came back to his senses and looked at Black Bolt in surprise. Medusa's simultaneous translation chimed in, "Alex, Black Bolt wants to spar with you." Spar? Alex's surprise grew, and he pointed at Black Bolt's mouth, the meaning clear as day. "Don't you have the ability to control energy?" Medusa continued to translate Black Bolt's instructions, even revealing a hint of teasing in her tone and expression. "This little thing is a piece of cake for you. Is that a spar?" Alex couldn't help but roll his eyes. Fighting and worrying about his opponent releasing too much energy was even more painful than simply taking a beating. Black Bolt's frozen expression finally softened, and a strange smile spread across his face, clearly in a very good mood. "Okay, I promise." Alex nodded speechlessly and agreed, then looked at Black Bolt with a provocative look on his face. "But be careful, I won't show mercy if we really fight." The smile on Black Bolt's face became brighter, and he shrugged with an expression of "I'm waiting for you," looking arrogant. "Where are we going to fight?" Alex chuckled and turned around to look around. This is not a place to fight. As soon as Alex finished speaking, Tetanus, who had been lying at Medusa's feet, stood up with a silver light on his head again. "I'll send you the first update first, and the second update will depend on the situation. I hope it can come out." Chapter 297 Black Bolt. Alex's vision went dark, and when he regained consciousness, he found himself in a desolate desert. The bizarre landscape, chilly air, and thin air left him perplexed. Could such a place exist on Earth? As he pondered this, his curiosity grew, and he looked up to see a massive blue planet hovering overhead. Alex's entire body trembled, and he looked at Black Bolt in disbelief. "Is this the moon?" Alex couldn't help but glance down at Tetanus, the giant bulldog now sprawled on the ground. Able to teleport from Earth to the moon, his teleportation abilities were only slightly inferior to his own. Black Bolt nodded, and Medusa, standing beside him, followed suit. "No one will disturb us here, so enjoy the fight." Alex curled his lips, muttering to himself, "There's a great god here," he thought, but didn't show it on his face. He chuckled softly and assumed a starting stance. Black Bolt waved his hand, signaling Medusa and Crystal to move aside, his eyes fixed on Alex without blinking. Black Bolt was completely confident in his own strength, no one on Earth could match him. But the Alex before him was different, he was a formidable foe. "Be careful, Alex." Medusa, standing not far behind Black Bolt, continued faithfully relaying Black Bolt's words. Alex's expression grew serious, his entire figure like a sword unsheathed, radiating undeniable strength and murderous intent. "You're the one to be careful of." As soon as he finished speaking, Alex took the lead. Without using teleportation, relying solely on his own speed, Alex rushed to Black Bolt's side in the blink of an eye. Not only did his teleportation fail, but Alex also failed to utilize magnetic field control and energy absorption. It wasn't arrogance. If Alex unleashed his full power, aside from a few who possessed the ability to control it, no one could withstand more than a few blows from him. Take Black Bolt, for example. His primary attack was infrasound, imbued with destructive energy. If Alex used energy consumption, even if Black Bolt screamed at the top of his lungs, he wouldn't be harmed in the slightest. This was power restraint. Of course, the main reason was that Alex's energy consumption was simply too abnormal. Even suppressing it, let alone controlling it, would be extremely difficult. Black Bolt sensed Alex's intentions, and a flicker of anger crossed his face. His mouth, unopened in years, opened for the first time, and he uttered a name, tinged with anger, Alex. Alex had overestimated himself, and he had also underestimated Black Bolt. Raging energy, accompanied by piercing sonic waves, rivaled the cosmic energy waves unleashed by Thanos. It rushed towards Alex before he could react. The ground between them seemed to have been ripped apart by a giant excavator, creating a massive chasm. Alex desperately tried to control the energy, even if it was just a few deflections. Unfortunately, under the raging destructive power, Alex's energy control was like a small boat on a turbulent sea, bobbing and weaving, powerless. Alex's body began to tremble violently under the impact of the energy. Fine wounds began to form on his tough skin, and trickles of blood oozed out. After struggling for a moment, Alex could only devour it. After merging with a black hole, Alex's energy absorption became even more powerful, transforming from passive absorption to active consumption. Once the devouring began, Alex's pressure was instantly relieved. But after a while, Alex realized he had underestimated Black Bolt. The energy released by Black Bolt was only one level lower than Thanos' cosmic energy, and the flow seemed endless. Soon, Alex's body could no longer withstand the pressure, and his swollen body felt like it was about to explode. Black Bolt, I'm going to strike back. Alex had originally planned to wait for Black Bolt's energy to run out and win without a fight, but now it seemed that this was no longer possible. He had to attack. Black Bolt's mouth opened wide, and the violent destructive energy continued to surge. I've been waiting for you. This was Medusa's voice. Alex grinned, his body brimming with energy, a massive golden beam colliding head-on with Black Bolt's infrasonic energy wave. Alex had traversed the universe and battled the superpower Thanos several times, so his understanding of energy was far more profound than Black Bolt's. Coupled with his ability to control energy, Alex easily gained the upper hand. Alex's golden beam of energy fought back bit by bit, starting at just half a meter long and growing until it finally clashed with Black Bolt's infrasonic energy wave. Seeing this, Black Bolt slowly closed his mouth, a bitter feeling welling in his heart. Although he and Alex appeared evenly matched, Black Bolt knew that in just a dozen minutes of energy competition, he had almost exhausted the energy he had absorbed over the years. Alex's expression of ease throughout made the difference obvious. Alex noticed Black Bolt had stopped attacking and immediately withdrew his attack. What? You're not competing anymore, I lost? Black Bolt lowered his head slightly. Medusa stepped forward from behind and spoke for him. If I keep going, I'll run out of energy. Actually, I can't hold out much longer. Alex chuckled, rubbing his head awkwardly. I've been able to hold out this long thanks to your energy. Alex didn't have that much energy himself. Without the energy he'd absorbed at the beginning, Alex wasn't sure he could have held out this long. That's your strength? Black Bolt slowly raised his head, his face expressionless, his eyes still gleaming with a fierce fighting spirit. Medusa had just finished translating Black Bolt's message when she suddenly received another message. She reached for her sword and turned to Alex, saying with a look of resignation, Alex, Black Bolt wants to fight you again. It's not a contest of energy, but a contest of strength. Alex paused, then turned to look at Black Bolt's muscular body. He smiled calmly and said, Don't think I lack your muscles, but my body is also very impressive. He then demonstrated a kung fu stance with a hint of boasting, and I know kung fu. Alex's body, constantly strengthened by energy and even restructured by black holes, has long surpassed human physical capabilities, making him a superhuman. Furthermore, Alex's fighting skills, refined by years of sword fighting, have reached the pinnacle of perfection. Alex prided himself more on his body and martial arts than on any other ability. Then Black Bolt was eager to fight. After Medusa conveyed her intentions, she once again pulled Crystal back. Compared to the thrilling energy showdown, the physical confrontation seemed somewhat lackluster, even somewhat uninteresting. Fortunately, this physical confrontation didn't last long, ending in less than 5 minutes. Faced with Alex's supreme fighting prowess, Black Bolt was powerless to fight back, enduring for over 4 minutes before ultimately conceding. Here's my second update, a little late, but I'd like to wish myself a happy birthday and hope for continued success. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298 The Catastrophe is Coming. Both matches ended with Black Bolt's defeat, much to the delight of Crystal, who was standing by and watching. She was overjoyed and kept praising Alex, not caring at all that Black Bolt's face was getting darker and darker. In the end, Alex couldn't stand it anymore and interrupted Crystal's endless praise. Since you're here, I'll take you to see someone. Alex was just making small talk, but he realized he had said the wrong thing the moment he opened his mouth. There are people on this moon. Medusa was the first to react, and immediately looked around with a wary look on her face, her red hair unconsciously starting to grow wildly. Alex had been thinking of fooling around, but when he saw that Medusa had talked him out of it, he nodded and said, "There's a bald guy living here who calls himself the Observer. He's quite the cool guy." Although he had let go of his grudge, Alex had never had a good impression of the Observer. "Observer?" Medusa exclaimed, her face growing increasingly tense. "Are you sure it's really the Observer?" "You know, the Observer." Alex was surprised to find that Medusa knew about the Observer. Medusa looked at Black Bolt and Crystal, who were looking at her with the same expression, nodded, and said seriously, "In the historical texts of the Inhumans, the Observers have appeared several times. They are the elders of the universe." Medusa turned to Alex, as if to confirm something. "Observers don't participate in the events of any living beings in the universe. They only witness and record major events of the universe as bystanders." Alex shrugged and said nonchalantly, "That's what Baldy told me to. Whether it's true or not, I don't know." As Alex finished speaking, the Observer Otto appeared, his huge bald head dazzling. "You're here," Alex casually said, then pointed at Black Bolt and the others, introducing them. "These are my friends, so I don't need to introduce them, do I?" Alex was so casual, but Black Bolt and the other two didn't, and they quickly bowed. Otto glanced at Black Bolt and the others calmly, then his gaze fell on Alex. His expression hardened, and with a hint of anger, he slowly said, "I'm here to inform you that a catastrophe is about to strike Earth, sweeping across the world. I hope you can take precautions." Otto hesitated, then turned to Black Bolt and added, "The Inhumans are not immune to this either. If we're not careful, our entire race will be annihilated." With a fleeting moment, Otto vanished without a moment's notice, leaving Alex and the other three staring at each other in bewilderment. "Bald, is that true?" Alex stared at the spot where Otto had disappeared, stunned for a moment, and asked with a look of doubt. Despite his words, Alex's eyes were filled with worry. Knowing Otto well, he wouldn't joke like that. Medusa, clearly understanding Alex's intention, shook her head gravely and said sternly, "No matter what, we must prepare early. Upon return, immediately begin the transformation of Alex City." Without waiting for Alex to speak, Medusa gave the order. "We must also work quickly on the Supreme Evolution project and strive for a swift outcome." Alex had no reason to object to Medusa's decision and nodded in agreement. "I'll tell Emma when I get back." "I'll absolutely cooperate." Otto's news had driven Alex and his group hurried back to Earth. After a brief stay in Atlan, Alex returned to Alex City with the crystal and the geneticists Medusa had dispatched. After handing the geneticists over to Emma, Alex rushed to New York and found Nick Fury. According to Otto, this crisis will sweep the world, which is bound to affect governments around the world. Dealing with governments is something S.H.I.E.L.D. is more adept at? Are you serious? After hearing what Alex said, Nick was a little surprised, but more skeptical. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s agents are spread all over the world, and its intelligence network is the most powerful in the world, but he hasn't received any news at all. I'm not sure whether it's true or not. Alex didn't care about Nick's doubts. No one would believe such news the first time they heard it. He smiled bitterly and sat on the sofa. While rubbing his eyebrows, he began to explain, "This news was told to me by a great god you can't even imagine. He shouldn't lie to me." "Great god," Nick repeated in surprise, not understanding what the great god Alex was talking about was. Alex, unsure how to explain, paused for a moment before saying, "He's just a very powerful being." Noticing Nick's nonchalant expression, Alex paused and added, "I was completely powerless against him." Nick's face paled at that, but when he saw Alex wasn't joking, he finally calmed down, though his expression remained somewhat incredulous. "What are you going to do?" Nick sighed, then took the initiative to ask. "I don't know either," Alex muttered to himself, slumping against the sofa. The bald guy didn't say anything, and I don't know what the catastrophe he's talking about is, or how to deal with it." Nick froze for a moment, then shrugged and said, "Okay, I get it, you get it." Alex sat up and turned to look at Nick, a look of surprise on his face. Nick raised an eyebrow and said seriously, "I'll secretly inform all governments about this matter and ask them to step up their vigilance. At the same time, I'll increase my intelligence investigations and hopefully yield some results." It sounded like Nick had done a lot, but in reality, he hadn't done anything. Alex understood, however, that in the absence of clarity, Nick's arrangements were understandable. At least he had alerted the governments. "Never mind, just do your best." Alex wiped his cheek vigorously, abruptly stood up, and left without a word. "I'll also have someone here to keep an eye on things. I hope it doesn't get too serious." Leaving SHIELD, Alex didn't know where to go. With Emma in Alex City and Charles with the X-Men, there wasn't much he needed to do. "Never mind, let's go see Tony." After some thought, Alex decided to check on his nephew Tony and strengthen him, lest he die in the ensuing catastrophe. That would be a shame for Howard. On a whim, Alex headed straight to Stark Industries. But to his surprise, he searched the entire company and found no sign of Tony. Has this kid gone somewhere again? Alex knew Tony's character well. He was a lot like a young Howard, always slacking off and enjoying the company of beautiful women. Alex muttered as he left Stark Industries, thinking, how about giving Tony a hard time and turning him into Iron Man? Alex had harbored this idea for a while, but Tony's character hadn't settled yet, and Alex was worried that Tony's transformation into Iron Man would only make him more aggressive, so he hadn't taken action. As he pondered this, Alex used his telekinesis to search for Tony. Tony didn't find him, but Alex did discover something unexpected. A winged mutant who didn't seem to belong to any particular mutant faction. Guess who this newcomer is? It should be easy to guess. Chapter 299 Angel. Worthington III. Interesting. Upon noticing this winged mutant, Alex immediately abandoned his search for Tony and instead began to track this mutant. With the X-Men now short on combat power, this mutant was a valuable asset. With this in mind, Alex teleported to the young man, Worthington III. Alex's sudden appearance startled Worthington III, who was soaring in the sky. He forgot to flap his enormous wings, sending him plummeting. Fortunately, Worthington III reacted quickly, regaining his balance and distancing himself from Alex's intense confrontation, observing him warily. "Who are you?" Worthington II's intuition told him that the guy in front of him was very powerful and he was no match for him, so he didn't take action immediately. Instead, he put on an attitude of wanting to talk things over. "What do you want to do?" Alex looked at the slightly immature Worthington III, smiled lightly and introduced himself. "Hello, I'm Alex, I mean no harm. Are you a mutant too?" Worthington III looked at Alex, who was suspended in the air, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he was a little nervous. "As you can see," Alex spread his hands and said casually, "I guess you have also heard of the Hellfire Club, or the Brotherhood of Mutants." Before Alex could finish, Worthington III interrupted him righteously and refused angrily. "I will never join you, never, dude, listen to me, okay?" Alex looked at the furious Worthington III with a depressed face, curled his lips and said helplessly, "Don't worry, I'm not from those two organizations. The reason I mentioned them is because I'm from the House of Mutants." "House of Mutants? What's that?" Worthington II was stunned when he heard this, and looked at Alex with a confused face. Alex's face darkened. He felt ashamed and distressed that the mutant family's reputation had sunk so low. "Okay, X-Men, I know. X-Films," Alex was interrupted again by Worthington III. The young man, completely ignoring Alex's increasingly grim expression, excitedly exclaimed, "The movies they make are so cool. X-Men, they're so amazing." Alex was completely speechless, unsure whether to be happy or frustrated. "Tell me, what exactly do you want to do?" After a moment of excitement, Worthington III finally regained his composure, turned to Alex, and asked, his youthful face still wary. "Well, I'm from the home of mutants, where the X-Men are." Alex sighed, unconcerned about whether Worthington III was listening or not, and spoke rapidly. "I came to you because I hope you can join the X-Men. Are you serious?" Worthington III had good hearing and heard Alex's words clearly, but he remained skeptical. Alex, losing his last bit of patience, replied angrily, "It's true. It couldn't be more true." Without waiting for Worthington II to react, He activated a teleportation and brought Worthington II directly to Alex City, the X-Men's base. "Alex, what are you doing here?" As Alex and Worthington II appeared, Charles immediately noticed them and connected telepathically. "Also, who's the young man next to you? A new subordinate for you," Alex said, glancing over at Worthington II, whose eyes were already shining. "Little guy, I'm taking you to see someone," he said, speaking to Charles. With that, Alex headed deeper into the base, completely ignoring Worthington II. Worthington II, now completely convinced by Alex's words and eager to join the X-Men, gazed around with dazed eyes as he quickly caught up to Alex, never leaving his side. Soon, Alex and Worthington II arrived at Charles' office. Upon seeing Charles, Worthington II exclaimed in surprise, his freckled face brimming with excitement. Professor X films typically feature the X-Men in its films. As the leader of the X-Men, Professor X had made several cameo appearances in the films. Charles was startled by Worthington II's excitement and instinctively glanced at Alex. Alex's face was wry, and just as he was about to speak, Worthington III, with the air of a noble son, introduced himself solemnly and seriously. "Warren Worthington III, you can call me Warren, or Angel." After a slight pause, Worthington II added, "Oh, Angel, that's my code name. I'm a huge X-Men fan." Worthington III, no, Angel, suddenly changed his expression, transforming into a fanatic, exclaiming excitedly, "I've watched the X-Men series at least 5 times, and you, Professor X, are my favorite." Charles was stunned for a moment before realizing that the young man calling himself Angel was referring to the X-Men movies. Upon realizing this, Charles's expression became as grim as Alex's, and he was even more amused and embarrassed. "I've always wanted to join the X-Men. It's my lifelong wish," Angel muttered, concluding with a sentence before looking at Charles with hope. Charles had never met anyone like him before. After a moment's hesitation, he asked, "Angel, do you know what the X-Men do?" Charles wanted to recruit true warriors, not this clearly immature child before him. "I know, of course I do," the Angel replied casually, then his expression changed again, becoming solemn as he spoke slowly, word by word. "The X-Men will always be committed to the harmonious coexistence of mutants and humans, protecting both humans and mutants, and maintaining world peace." Alex couldn't help but put his hand to his forehead, not wanting to stay and listen to this movie lover any longer. He said, "Charles, I'll leave this man to you." Charles rolled his eyes, his face filled with contempt for Alex, but his face said seriously, "It seems you really understand us X-Men." Charles suddenly changed the subject, and a powerful aura erupted from him. "But the X-Men only need true warriors." "Are you sure you can do it?" "I can," the Angel shouted back, a little excited. The wings that had been folded behind his back immediately spread out, their snow-white wings looking very beautiful. Charles looked at the Angel's huge wings, paused, and immediately nodded. "Okay, you are an angel now." Everyone was quiet. They must have guessed it, so why not be more proactive? Chapter 300 The Angel is missing. 3 days passed unnoticed, and the catastrophe the observers had predicted never arrived. Ever since the capture of the Supreme Evolutionary, the world had entered a rare period of tranquility. Even the Brotherhood of Mutants and Hydra, always prone to stirring up trouble, seemed to have vanished, with no further news. The strange silence didn't relax Alex, instead, it intensified his anxiety, for it was the calm before the storm. After taking time off to strengthen Tony, Alex spent his days in idleness. He couldn't get involved in the affairs of the Supreme Evolutionary, nor did he need to help with Alex City. Even the X-Men were supervised by Charles. With no place to go, Alex could only wander the world like a headless chicken, hoping for a lucky break. Unfortunately, after several days, Alex found nothing, and his anxiety and frustration only grew. After running for a whole day, when darkness enveloped Alex City, Alex came back again. After saying hello to Emma and the other girls, Alex walked towards the X-Men base, ready to talk to Charles. As far as Alex knew, there was a reserve member of the X-Men who could predict the future. Although sometimes his predictions were not very good, and although they were predictions without any timeline, it was still a hope. As soon as Alex entered the base, Charles ran out with Alex and his group. He was wearing yellow suits with the X-Men logo, and it seemed that he was going to carry out a mission. "What happened, Charles?" Alex stretched out his hand to stop Charles and his group, looking confused. Charles stopped at the sound and looked up at Alex, his face filled with anxiety. "Something's happened to Angel." "Angel? That little brat." Alex was slightly startled, his mind immediately flashing back to that crazy fan. He paused, then pointed at Charles and his group, his astonishment growing. "What happened to him that required such a fuss?" Charles shook his head uncertainly. "I don't know, but it's been 3 days since he went home." Charles paused, a hint of anxiety on his face. "Then I used the encephalogram to look for Angel, but I couldn't find him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air." The encephalogram, a device developed jointly by Charles and several mutant scientists, was not much different from the one in the movies, only far more powerful. With it, Charles could connect to the minds of any living creature on Earth and control or influence them, including not only humans but also countless birds, beasts, and insects. "What's going on?" Alex frowned slightly, sensing something unusual, possibly even connected to the catastrophe the observers had mentioned. Alex's expression hardened at this thought. He turned to look at Charles and said in a deep voice, "Explain it more clearly." "When you brought Angel here, I recruited him to join the X-Men." Charles seemed to have a vague sense of something and didn't hide anything. "Then he said he needed to go back to New York to tell his family, but he never came back and disappeared without a trace." Alex's brows furrowed, and after a moment's hesitation, he asked, "Have you looked for him at home?" "Yes, Angel did go home, but he came back soon after and then disappeared." Charles paused for a moment, took a breath, and continued, "It seems that Angel disappeared on his way to X-Film. X-Film is a key base for the mutant community in New York City and a transit point connecting Alex City to the real world. Whether entering or leaving Alex City, everyone must pass through here first. Of course, except for Alex." "Any clues?" Alex's face suddenly changed, and a murderous aura shone from him. Angel was already a member of the X-Men. Anyone who took on him would be taking on the mutant family, something Alex absolutely wouldn't allow. Charles smiled wryly, shook his head, and pointed to a scruffy young man behind him. "So, I found someone skilled in tracking, hoping to find something. In that case, I'll go with you." Since he had some free time anyway, Alex decided to follow and see what they could find. Perhaps they'd find something unexpected. Charles and the others, along with Alex, teleported directly to New York, Angel's home. It was daytime in New York, the busiest time of day, and the streets were filled with hurried men in suits and ties. Alex had been prepared, and the presence went unnoticed. "Okay, now it's your turn." Alex turned to look at the scruffy young man beside him, then took a step back and surveyed his surroundings, rapidly expanding his telekinesis to search for Angel. The scruffy young man was a little nervous, stunned for a moment before reacting and immediately unleashing his powers to track him down. After a while, the scruffy young man seemed to have made a discovery, sprinting off in one direction at a furious pace. Charles and the others quickly gave chase, and Alex followed closely. Alex was splitting his attention, following the scruffy young man while constantly scanning the Big Apple with his telepathic power. But to Alex's dismay, he found nothing, not even a single sighting of an angel. Elsewhere, the scruffy young man's pace slowed, his expression growing faintly agitated. It seemed he hadn't found anything either. Disappointed, Alex was about to expand his search when he stumbled upon an unusual phenomenon. It seemed as if over half the population of New York City had contracted a disease, albeit a minor one. Alex hadn't noticed this at first, thanks to the power of the elixir. The elixir could cure any disease at the genetic level. Alex had copied this ability from the elixir when he was infected with the energy virus. After being stranded in space, Alex's abilities mutated, and the copied abilities became permanent, including the healing power of the elixir. However, because this power was of little use to Alex, he rarely used it. For the elixir to possess powerful healing abilities, of course, it also required a powerful ability to detect illnesses. Just now, while searching New York, the elixir's abilities were unexpectedly triggered, and waves of New Yorkers were found to be ill. By the time Alex realized this anomaly, nearly everyone in New York had fallen ill, and this was clearly not normal. "Something's odd." Alex stopped and turned to survey his surroundings, his eyes sharp and intimidating, like a cheetah stalking its prey. Charles noticed something was wrong with Alex and glanced around, finding nothing. He was surprised. "What's wrong, Alex?" "Charles, have you noticed? These people are all sick." Alex casually waved his hand, his expression grave. Charles was even more surprised. He turned around and saw that quite a few people looked unusual, looking ill. But Charles still didn't understand what Alex was trying to say. What's going on? From what I've seen, everyone in New York has contracted some sort of illness, some mild, some severe. What? Charles exclaimed in disbelief. Then his expression shifted, and he suddenly understood something. He said solemnly, "It looks like someone's really messing around." Scorpio apologizes for the 2 days of hiatus. I won't go into the specifics, it would be too much to say. It's getting colder at night, and without heating, my hands and feet are freezing cold. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.